I was never the kind of person who thought revenge was worth the energy. I always figured karma would take care of things in the end, and that holding on to anger would just eat away at me. But let me tell you something. There's a special kind of fury that burns in your chest when someone you trusted, someone you literally shared a roof with your whole life, takes everything you've worked for, and your own mother looks you dead in the eye and tells you it doesn't matter. My name's Aiden, I'm 24, and up until a few months ago, I still lived at home. Not because I was lazy or aimless, but because it made financial sense. I worked remotely as a freelance UI/UX designer, stacked cash like a maniac, and set a goal: save enough to launch my own design studio by the time I hit 25. I lived modestly, didn't party, didn't blow money on dumb stuff. Just worked, saved, repeated. And it was working. I'd built up close to $15,000 in savings, kept in a separate checking account I never touched unless it was for studio expenses. The card for that account stayed in my desk drawer, tucked behind an old hard drive. It wasn't even in my wallet. That's how little I used it. Now here's where things start to get weird. My younger brother, Zach, just turned 17. He's the complete opposite of me. Loud, impulsive, obsessed with clout and appearances. He talks like a TikTok comment section, calls everything mid, and somehow thinks he's going to be a famous streamer despite never streaming anything for more than 20 minutes. Our relationship was rocky even before all this. Not because I hated him or anything, but because every time I tried to be the responsible older brother, I got labeled as controlling or uptight. It's like my whole family had this unspoken rule: Zach messes up, we all smile and move on. Aiden gets frustrated about it. He's ruining the mood. For example, last Christmas, Zach threw a fit because he didn't get the exact model of gaming headset he wanted. I'm talking full-blown meltdown, yelling, slamming his door, refusing to come to dinner. My mom, in the middle of carving the turkey, gave me this tired look and said, "Just let him have your pair, Aiden. You don't even game that much." And stupidly, I did. Because it wasn't worth the fight. Because it was Christmas. Because that's how it always went. But things didn't really start to unravel until earlier this summer. It was a small moment, almost forgettable on its own, but looking back, it was the first real hint that something wasn't right. I was in the kitchen after a long client call, reheating some leftovers, when Zach strolled in wearing a pair of Yeezys. Brand new, still crisp. He didn't even bother to remove the tag from the laces. "Where'd you get those?" I asked casually, genuinely curious. He smirked. "Online." I raised an eyebrow. "With what money?" He shrugged. "I've got ways." Now, let me be clear, Zach didn't have a job. He'd started and quit 3 part-time gigs in the last year, always with some dramatic excuse. His bank account, last I checked, had about $200 in it. So either he was selling organs on the dark web, or someone was bankrolling him. And I had a sinking feeling I knew who. Later that night, I asked my mom if she gave Zach money for the shoes. She barely looked up from her tablet. "No, why? He bought Yeezys." She just gave a little laugh and waved her hand. Boys and their sneakers. Let him enjoy himself. Right? But how did he pay for them? She sighed like I was being ridiculous. "Aiden, not everything needs an investigation. He probably used Afterpay or Klarna or whatever these kids use now. Relax." I wanted to believe that. I really did. But something in her tone, the way she dismissed me so quickly, itched at the back of my mind. It was the same tone she used any time Zach messed up. Defensive, protective, as if acknowledging his flaws would mean admitting she failed as a parent. Still, I let it go. Or at least, I tried to. Then came the next red flag. A week later, I noticed my external hard drive was slightly out of place. It sounds stupid, I know, but I'm a meticulous person. I organize my desk like it's a command center. That drawer was always closed flush. That hard drive was always aligned to the left. But now it was pushed forward slightly, as if someone had opened the drawer too fast and knocked it out of position. I opened it. My debit card was gone. At first, I panicked, tore through my room, checked my wallet, laptop bag, jacket pockets, even the trash. Nothing. And then the dread hit me. I opened my banking app, typed in the credentials for my studio account, and froze. Balance, $6,021.34. $6,000. Gone. I scrolled through the transaction history, and each line made my stomach churn harder than the last. $1,300, Apple Store. $600, Supreme. $500, PlayStation Direct. and on and on. Almost every purchase made between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. the night before. I felt like I was watching a horror movie unfold in slow motion. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I knew was that someone had stolen my card, drained nearly 10 grand from an account I'd been building for years, and didn't even have the decency to cover their tracks. My first instinct was to call the bank and freeze the card, which I did. Then I took a few minutes to pace around my room, trying to wrap my head around what to do next. And then, I heard laughter from downstairs. I walked out of my room, down the hallway, and paused at the top of the stairs. Zach was in the living room, surrounded by boxes. A new PS5 sat on the table. Fresh sneakers lined the floor. An unopened iPhone lay in his lap. And my mom was standing behind him with a proud smile on her face, saying, "Wow, you really made out like a bandit this week, huh?" That was the moment something snapped in me. But I didn't yell. I didn't storm in. I didn't say a word. I just walked down the stairs slowly, one step at a time, until I stood in the doorway like a ghost. Zach looked up, mid-laugh, and the color drained from his face. My mom turned to me and said, "Aiden, what's wrong?" I looked at Zach. I looked at her. Then I said in the calmest voice I could muster, "Where's my debit card?" And that's when everything started to unravel. She blinked, as if I'd just spoken in a foreign language. "What do you mean, your debit card?" "My studio account debit card. The one I kept locked in my desk drawer. The one that suddenly went missing. The one someone used to blow nearly $9,000 overnight." I didn't raise my voice. If anything, it came out quieter than I expected. But it wasn't calm, it was cold. Zach stood up quickly, almost knocking over the PS5 box beside him. "Bro, chill. What are you even talking about?" That fake innocence, the lazy attempt at acting like he didn't know what I meant. I'd seen it before. So many times. When he broke my laptop in high school and blamed the cat. When he racked up a phone bill using international calls and said it must have been spam. Every time he got caught, he pulled that same wide-eyed expression, like a kid who just learned fire is hot. And every time, my mom ate it up like gospel. But this time, I wasn't giving him a single inch. I walked over to the PS5 and flipped the box. The shipping label was still attached. Ordered at 2:41 a.m. Shipped to our address. Under the name, Zach Miller. His face went pale. My mom looked from him to me, lips parting slightly. "Aiden, I'm sure there's some mistake." I locked eyes with her. "There is. The mistake is thinking I wouldn't notice nearly 10 grand vanishing overnight." She folded her arms, that defensive posture I'd seen way too many times. "You can't prove it was him." I turned my phone around and showed her the app. Every charge was made between 2 and 5 a.m. From this house. On websites he uses. "Using my card," Zach stammered. I didn't even know your PIN, man." "I never said the card was a debit with a PIN. It's a Visa. I use it online. No PIN needed." He flinched. My mom looked like she'd been slapped. For a few seconds, the room went completely still. The kind of still that doesn't last long. That always cracks under the weight of denial. And sure enough, she cracked. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Aiden. He's 17. Do you really think he understands what he did?" I stared at her. Yes. He had to sift through my drawers, find the card, memorize the number, go online, and go shopping. That's not an accident. That's not a mistake. That's calculated theft. Zach jumped in, louder now. "I thought it was your extra card. The one you use for games and stuff." "I don't have an extra card," I said slowly. "You knew what you were doing." My mom's voice rose. "Aiden, enough. You're blowing this way out of proportion. It's not like he hurt anyone." I just stared at her, trying to process the absurdity. Not like he hurt anyone. You don't think stealing $9,000 from me hurts? My voice cracked. I didn't even try to hide it. That account was for my business. That's the money I've been saving for years. For my future. She gave me a dismissive wave, like I was being dramatic. "You're always so serious. It's just money. You're good with computers, you'll make it back." "Not the point," I said through gritted teeth. But it didn't matter. It never mattered. Because in this house, Zach's comfort always came first. Always. And for the first time in my life, I felt it in my bones. This wasn't just favoritism. This was willful blindness. My dad wasn't around. Hasn't been for years. When I was 13, he walked out without saying goodbye. Left us with a mortgage, a used minivan, and a broken dining chair that still creaks whenever someone leans back in it. Mom did what she had to do. I get that. She worked 2 jobs for a while. Cried when she didn't think we could hear her. And for years, I tried to make it easier. I took on more, helped with Zach, cooked dinner when she worked late, even skipped college to freelance so we wouldn't drown in debt. But somewhere along the way, the narrative flipped. I wasn't the helpful older son anymore. I became the rigid one, the uptight one, the one who didn't understand Zach's creative spirit. And Zach, he became her little redemption story. The second chance. The baby who needed protection from the harshness of the world, including me. I backed away from them both. Walked upstairs without another word. My hands were shaking, but I wasn't crying. Not yet. I just felt hollow. I locked my door, flopped into my desk chair, and sat in silence. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. I could hear them downstairs laughing. Laughing. I opened my banking app again. Total damage. $8,934.67. I emailed the bank's fraud department. Marked each charge as unauthorized. Wrote out a full report. Attached screenshots. I knew there was a chance I'd get the money back, but that would take weeks, maybe months. In the meantime, my studio launch? Delayed. My rent savings? Gutted. My trust in my family? Shattered. Around midnight, I heard a soft knock at the door. It opened before I could respond. Mom stepped in, holding a small plate of cookies like I was a child she was bribing after a tantrum. "I baked your favorite," she said softly. "Double chocolate chip." I didn't say anything. She set the plate down on my dresser. "Look, I know you're upset, but this isn't worth tearing the family apart over." That's when I snapped. "Tearing the family apart?" I repeated. "He stole from me. You defended him. And I'm the one tearing the family apart." She winced. "I'm just trying to keep the peace." I stood up slowly. Keeping the peace doesn't mean ignoring a felony. Keeping the peace means holding people accountable. He's almost a legal adult. If I did something like this at 17, you'd have dragged me to the police station yourself. She flinched like I'd slapped her. "I can't believe you think this is okay," I continued. "You didn't even make him return anything. He's downstairs right now setting up a PS5 with my money like it's a Christmas gift." She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her voice, when it came, was defensive and small. "He's just been going through a rough patch." "We've all gone through rough patches, Mom. I didn't rob my brother to cope." She looked down at her shoes. "He promised he'd pay you back." "With what?" "His imaginary Twitch donations." She didn't answer. I sat back down, shaking my head. "You're not even going to punish him, are you?" Silence. "I'm filing a police report," I said flatly. She snapped her head up. "What?" No, you are not." "I am. This isn't just a family issue. It's theft. You can't do that to your own brother. He's just a kid." "He's a thief," I said. "And if you're not going to hold him accountable, I will." And then, her mask cracked. Her voice dropped to a low, venomous hiss I'd never heard before. "If you go to the police," she said, "you'll regret it." That stopped me cold. Is that a threat? Her eyes widened slightly, as if she surprised even herself. But then she doubled down. "Think about it, Aiden. If you make this public, what do you think will happen to me? To our family? You think I can afford a lawyer? You think people won't judge me for raising a criminal?" I stared at her. "So your concern is your reputation, not the fact that your son robbed me blind." Her face hardened. "You always think you're better than us. That you're smarter, more mature. But you're not. You're just a boy with a laptop and a superiority complex." I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was insane. "You know what?" I said. "Get out of my room. I raised you. Get out." She slammed the door behind her. And that was the moment. The exact second everything changed. Not when I saw the missing money. Not even when Zach smirked at me from the couch. It was that look in her eyes. That bitterness. That resentment. It wasn't just that she defended Zach. It was that deep down, she resented me for being the adult in the house. I barely slept that night. Just stared at the ceiling, listening to muffled laughter from downstairs. The smell of microwaved popcorn drifted under my door. My heartbeat was so loud, it sounded like footsteps. Around 4 a.m., I checked the last email I'd received. The bank had already flagged several charges. A fraud investigator would follow up in the next 3 to 5 business days. I closed my laptop. And that's when I decided, if my family didn't want to hold Zach accountable, I'd do it myself. The revenge wouldn't be loud. It wouldn't be explosive. It wouldn't be a scream in the middle of the living room. It would be slow, precise, ruthless, because I'd spent 24 years building quietly, and they had no idea who they'd just pushed over the edge. The next morning was quieter than usual. No Zach stomping down the hallway yelling into his headset. No mom yelling after him to eat breakfast before he games. The house felt off. Not peaceful, just weird. Like everyone was waiting for someone else to make the first move. And that someone was me. I didn't come out of my room for hours. I wasn't sulking. I wasn't hiding. I was planning. I'd already filed the police report online that morning, just after sunrise. Typed it out carefully. Detailed every charge, every timestamp, every item I could trace back to Zach. I attached screenshots. Even uploaded a photo I took of the PS5 and sneaker boxes from the night before. The total came to $8,934.67. Fraudulent charges to my business account. Filed under identity theft and unauthorized use of a debit card. I submitted the report, saved the confirmation code, and sat back in my chair. Then I stared at the wall for a long time. It's a strange feeling, hitting a breaking point in your own house. It's not loud. It doesn't look like a movie scene with doors slamming and glass shattering. It's a quiet kind of devastation. A cold realization that the people you counted on most have no problem watching you fall, as long as it keeps them comfortable. Around noon, I opened my door. My mom was in the kitchen, texting one-handed while stirring something in a pot. She looked up, eyes searching my face, then immediately turned away when she saw I wasn't going to speak. Zach was on the couch in the living room. Hoodie up, controller in hand, new headphones over his ears. He didn't even glance at me. I poured a glass of water, drank it slowly, and walked right back to my room. The police called later that evening. The officer on the phone was polite but firm. Said he'd reviewed my report and confirmed the purchases matched the IP address registered to our house. He asked if I knew who the perpetrator was. I paused. My stomach twisted. Then I said, yes, my younger brother. He's 17. There was a beat of silence. Then the officer asked if I was pressing charges or simply filing for documentation. That was the moment. The moment where I could have walked it back. Could have said, no, it's a family matter. Could have protected the same people who let this happen. But I didn't. I'm pressing charges, I said. My voice didn't shake. He thanked me, told me someone would be in touch, and that the investigation would proceed accordingly. I hung up, then turned off my phone. I didn't want to deal with the fallout right away. I knew it was coming. Knew it would be nuclear, but for now, I wanted peace. That night, I didn't sleep again. But I wasn't lying awake in shock this time. I was calculating. The next morning, the first bomb dropped. I walked into the kitchen to grab coffee, and my mom was already pacing with her phone in her hand. You filed a police report? She yelled before I even made it to the sink. I didn't respond. They called me this morning. Said they're investigating my son. Your brother. Still silent. I poured the coffee. You're seriously going to ruin his life over some sneakers and a stupid PlayStation? I finally turned to look at her. He already ruined something. My trust. My plans. My savings. Why does his life matter more than mine? He's a child, Aiden. He's a thief, I said flatly. And if this family won't hold him accountable, someone has to. Her expression morphed into something I hadn't seen before. Not just disappointment. Hatred. You're not welcome here anymore. There it was. The moment I officially became the villain in my own home. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just nodded. And within 2 hours, I had packed 2 duffel bags, grabbed my work gear, and walked out. No goodbye from Zach. No apology. No offer to help. My mom stood with her arms crossed at the top of the stairs like she was watching a stranger leave. I slept in my car that night. It was mid-June, sticky and uncomfortable. I parked in a quiet grocery store lot a few towns over, angled the seat back, and stared at the ceiling. My neck ached. My back throbbed. But weirdly, I felt lighter. There's a strange freedom in having nothing left to lose. The next day, I texted an old friend from high school, Dylan. We hadn't talked much since graduation, but I remembered him posting about having a basement unit he was trying to rent out. I didn't expect him to say yes. I just asked if it was still available and if I could crash for a few days while I figured stuff out. To my surprise, he said yes without hesitation. 2 hours later, I was hauling my bags into a dim little basement apartment with exposed pipes, a mattress on the floor, and a single window that looked out onto someone's tire. It smelled like old carpet and laundry detergent. But it had a lock, and it wasn't my car. First week's free, Dylan said. After that, just give me whatever you can until you're on your feet. I almost cried, but I didn't. I just said thank you. And so began the slow rebuild. I started working double shifts, taking on more freelance gigs than I thought I could handle. I redesigned a dental website, ran UX audits for 2 e-commerce stores, and even coded an entire mobile prototype for a startup in Berlin. I worked from Dylan's kitchen table, from coffee shops, even from the back of my car when the Wi-Fi was better in town. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. The bank investigation took a few weeks. Eventually, they refunded about 80% of the stolen money. Not all of it, but enough. Enough to breathe again. Meanwhile, the police case against Zach was quietly moving forward. Since he was a minor, the process was slower and more delicate. I got a few follow-up calls. They asked if I had more documentation. I sent them emails, screenshots, invoices, the works. I didn't hear anything from my family during that time. Not a word. But I started to hear things about them. One night, Dylan came home from a grocery run and said, "Hey, I think I saw your brother at the Apple store today." He was arguing with the staff about a locked iPhone. Kept saying it was a gift. Looked pretty heated. I nodded. Didn't say anything. 2 days later, I got a DM on Instagram from an old neighbor. It read, "Hey Aiden, just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything that happened with your brother. Heard about the whole situation. You didn't deserve that." Word was spreading. And for once, I didn't feel ashamed. I wasn't the problem. I wasn't the one who stole, or lied, or looked the other way. I was the one who finally said enough. About a month after I moved into Dylan's place, something unexpected happened. I got an email from a company I'd pitched to a year ago. One of those, "We'll keep your portfolio on file" brush-offs. They said they'd recently seen my work again. Turns out, one of my client redesigns had gone semi-viral in a design subreddit, and they wanted to bring me on as a contractor for a 6-month project. The rate? $5,000 per month. Remote. Full creative control. I sat there staring at the email, rereading it over and over. Then I burst out laughing. It was the first time I'd laughed in weeks. That contract was a game changer. It let me pay Dylan proper rent. It let me upgrade my workspace. And slowly, I started building again, not just the business, but myself. I joined a local startup networking group. I began mentoring junior designers online. I rebuilt my website from scratch and launched a small digital product, UI templates for freelancers. It sold better than I expected. I started feeling proud of my work again. Of myself. There were nights I still thought about my family. Nights I imagined walking through the front door again, demanding answers, closure, something. But every time I played it out in my head, it always ended the same way: silence, denial, deflection. So I let it go? Mostly. Then, one afternoon, about 2 months after I moved out, I got a letter. Not an email. A real letter. Handwritten. The envelope was smudged and slightly torn. It was from my mom. The note was short. Just a few lines. "Aiden, I hope you're okay. I miss you. I didn't know how to handle everything, and I realize now I failed both of you in different ways. I'm sorry I didn't protect you when I should have. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." I read it 4 times. Then I folded it up, slid it into my drawer, and didn't respond. Not yet. Because as much as I wanted to believe she meant it, I needed more than sorry. I needed to know that things had changed. That she had changed. That Zach had changed. And I didn't believe that yet. But something in that letter stirred a thought. What if they hadn't just wronged me financially? What if they'd been hiding more than just favoritism? Because I'd heard a rumor. One that wouldn't leave my head. A rumor about where Zach got the idea to steal my card in the first place. And when I looked closer, when I started connecting dots I'd ignored for years, I realized the theft wasn't spontaneous. It was orchestrated. And the truth behind it would change everything. The letter sat in my drawer for a week before I picked it up again. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe that I'd reread it and feel something warm, some spark of reconciliation. Instead, I felt a chill. Something about the way it was written felt off. Not just the sudden shift in tone, but the timing. Why now? Why send this weeks after going full scorched earth on me? Why not text, call, or show up? She knew where I worked. She knew where Dylan lived. She hadn't lifted a finger since the day I left. Now suddenly she missed me? I turned the letter over in my hand. Something felt rehearsed. Like it was written for the record, not from the heart. It got worse when I checked the envelope again. At the bottom corner, scribbled faintly in pencil, was a short note, clearly added after the fact. "Zach doesn't know I'm writing this. Please don't mention it." And just like that, the pieces started falling into place. I couldn't stop thinking about what Dylan had said, that he'd seen Zach at the Apple store, fighting to unlock a phone, and that Instagram DM from the neighbor. Plus, another message I hadn't thought much of at the time, from my cousin Lauren, weeks ago, just after I filed the police report. Hey, weird question. Did you buy Zach an iPhone for his birthday? He said it was from you, but it seemed off. Back then, I hadn't had the energy to answer. Now, that message lit up like a signal flare in my memory. Zach told multiple people that I had bought him a phone. Why? Why go out of his way to lie like that? Unless he wanted people to believe I gave him permission. To create a paper trail. A defense. And the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. The theft wasn't just impulsive. It was calculated. Planned. Which meant he probably didn't act alone. So I started digging. I didn't have access to the old house Wi-Fi or the router logs, and the police wouldn't share details of an ongoing juvenile case. But I still had one asset they didn't. The receipts. Literal ones. From his purchases. I'd saved screenshots of the confirmation emails when I filed the fraud report, and they were all tied to an email I didn't recognize. Miller92shop@outlook.com. That domain didn't match Zach's usual email. He had one of those obnoxious gamer handles like Zach the Beast for everything. So I copied the email and checked if it was linked to any public accounts. It was. He'd used that Outlook account to register on a sneaker resale forum called Lux Drop, a shady, high-markup marketplace full of resellers, scalpers, and hype beasts trying to flip designer shoes at a profit. I logged in using the forgot password trick and guessed that he might have reused one of his old favorites. After a few tries, boom. Access. The inbox was full of order confirmations, return requests, and tracking numbers. Most of them were placed between 2 o'clock and 4:30 a.m. on the same night my card was drained. But something caught my eye. An email thread titled, Need help moving a few items, fast. Mom said you'd help. The sender? KarenM_Miller@Outlook.com. My mother's email. I clicked. The first message was from Zach. Hey, just got the stuff? Mom said you could help me list a few things and flip them fast. Got some Yeezys, Jordan 1s, and the PS5. Want to keep the iPhone though, lol. Then, my mom's reply. Keep it low profile. Don't list too much at once. If anyone asks, say you used your savings and got help from your big brother as a graduation gift. And there it was. The nail in the coffin. She didn't just excuse his behavior. She didn't just ignore it. She helped him cover it up. Every flash of guilt I thought I saw in that letter, gone. That wasn't guilt. That was strategy. She was scared. Scared that I'd keep digging. Scared the case might move forward. Scared that her good kid narrative was falling apart. And she was right to be scared, because now I had everything I needed. The plan formed slowly, over a couple of days. I didn't want an explosion. I wanted precision. I wanted control. And most of all, I wanted them to understand exactly what they'd lost. The first step was gathering my allies. I reached out to Lauren, my cousin, the one who'd asked about the iPhone. We hadn't talked in a while, but she'd always been decent to me growing up. The kind of cousin who never picked sides during family drama, who stayed out of it, but didn't pretend not to notice. I sent her a message asking if we could talk. Told her I needed to clear something up about Zach. She replied almost instantly. Absolutely. I've been waiting for you to say something. We met at a little diner just outside town. She slid into the booth, eyes wide. Okay, what actually happened? She asked. Because Zach's story keeps changing. I told her everything. From the card theft to the purchases to the fake graduation gift lie. I even showed her the emails I'd recovered. She didn't look surprised. I knew something was off, she said. At Grandpa's birthday last month, he kept saying you were hooking him up with gear because you felt bad for being so hard on him. He had this whole sob story about how you finally made peace and wanted to help him get into streaming. I nearly choked on my water. He said what? Yeah, she said. And your mom was sitting right next to him, smiling, nodding. That confirmed it. It wasn't just a cover-up. It was a coordinated PR campaign inside the family. I asked if she'd be willing to talk to the investigator on my case, maybe submit a statement. She didn't hesitate. Absolutely. You're not crazy, Aiden. Everyone sees what's happening. We've just been trained not to talk about it. I thanked her. Then I called Dylan, told him everything. He was quiet at first. Then he asked, what do you want to do? And I knew my answer instantly. I want them to feel it. The loss. The silence. The shame. I want them to sit in the mess they made. And that's when Dylan gave me the final piece. You ever think about telling your story? Like, publicly. What? Like, posted online. Why not? People need to hear stuff like this. Family favoritism. Financial abuse. It's real. It happens. I chewed on that. Could I? Should I? Would it feel petty? Or would it be justice? Over the next week, I started writing. Not just a Reddit post or a Twitter thread. I wrote an article. A full, thoughtful breakdown of what happened. I called it, When Your Family Chooses the Thief Over You. A cautionary tale about enabling and entitlement. I didn't name names. No addresses. No slander. Just facts. Screenshots of transactions. The fake email trail. The shoe reselling cover-up. The police report confirmation. My cousin's statement. Even a blurred image of the PS5 and sneakers piled on the living room floor. I ended it with a message that wasn't angry, but clear. The people who should protect you the most sometimes won't. And when that happens, it's not betrayal to walk away. It's survival. I published it on Medium. Dylan helped me cross-post it on Reddit, Twitter, and a few design freelancer forums. We added tags for financial abuse, family dynamics, and fraud. Within 48 hours, it went viral. Tens of thousands of views. Hundreds of comments. Emails from strangers sharing similar stories. Even a few offers from podcasts asking if I'd be willing to speak about it. I didn't respond to those. Not yet. This wasn't about fame. But then something happened that shook me to my core. I got a call from the detective assigned to my case. Aiden, he said, something's come up. Your mother just contacted us. My pulse spiked. She's trying to recant a previous statement. Says the purchases were a misunderstanding. That she was involved and doesn't want to press charges against Zach. She's asking for the case to be dropped. I closed my eyes. What happens if she does that? I asked. Well, it complicates things. But the case was filed under your name. You're the victim, so it's still active. But it's clear they're starting to panic. I thanked him and hung up. They weren't just scared of the police anymore. They were scared of the spotlight. The mask was cracking, and I wasn't done yet. Because the final piece of my plan was personal. They wanted the world to believe I was the villain? Fine. But they'd soon find out that the villain they created was smarter, calmer, and far more dangerous than they ever imagined. I never imagined I'd become the kind of person who plotted revenge. I always saw myself as the take-the-high-road guy, the one who stays calm, turns the other cheek, avoids drama. But here's the thing. When someone burns the high road behind you and leaves you standing in the ashes, you don't walk, you rebuild. And if you're smart, you rebuild with bricks that fall exactly where they least expect. By the time my Medium article started gaining traction, I'd already drafted the second phase of my plan. Not out of pettiness, but out of necessity. Because I knew my family wouldn't go quietly. I knew Zach wouldn't admit guilt. I knew my mother wouldn't apologize sincerely. And I knew that if I wanted real closure, not the kind you wait years for, hoping someone has a change of heart, I had to create it. Within a week of the article going viral, the comments flooded in. Some people shared their own stories of family betrayal and theft. Others asked for advice. A few trolls told me to get over it, or he's just a kid. But they were drowned out by the voices of support. The story struck a chord with people, not just because of the theft, but because it mirrored a common, ugly truth, that some families will weaponize love as an excuse to never hold each other accountable. That's when I made the final move. The one that would ensure none of this got swept under the rug. I started with the truth bomb. Using the platform I'd built from the article, I made a follow-up post, a short, well-documented update titled, Yes, my family tried to cover up the theft. Here's proof. This one included redacted screenshots of the emails between Zach and my mom. It had Lauren's statement, the message about the fake graduation gift, the Apple Store incident, even a screenshot of my mom's note at the bottom of the letter she sent me, the one saying not to tell Zach she wrote. Again, I kept it clean. No names, no addresses. But the implications were undeniable. I didn't need to scream it from the rooftops. I just needed to let the facts speak. It was enough. 3 days after the post went live, my mom called me. Not texted, not emailed, called. The name, Mom, lit up my phone screen like a curse. I let it ring. She called again 2 hours later. Then again at midnight. Still, I didn't answer. On the fourth call, I finally picked up. There was a long pause on the other end before I heard her voice. Aiden, she said. Please stop. It was a broken whisper. One I almost didn't recognize. I'm not spreading lies, I replied. Everything I posted was true. You're humiliating us. Your brother can't even go to school without people whispering. You've destroyed our reputation. No, I said calmly. Zach did that. You did that. I just told the truth. She sniffled. You don't understand what this is doing to our family. That's where you're wrong. I understand exactly what this is doing. Because I lived through it. And now you get to live with the consequences. She started to say something else, but I hung up. That was the last time I spoke to her. I found out what happened next in pieces, mostly from Lauren and a few distant relatives who slowly started reaching out after the dust began to settle. Zach was pulled from school for a week due to personal family matters. In reality, he'd become a walking target. Not bullied, just exposed. Kids who once envied his flashy new gear started asking questions. Some teachers, those who had known me for years, quietly sided with the facts. It became clear that the golden boy had smudged his own shine. Then came the legal fallout. Despite my mom's desperate calls and attempts to retract her involvement, the police moved forward with the case. Juvenile court was different than adult court, sure, but it wasn't a slap on the wrist either, not with the volume of evidence I provided. Zach was charged with felony-level identity theft and financial fraud. Since it was his first offense, the judge allowed for a diversion program, intensive probation, restitution, community service, and mandatory counseling. But he didn't walk away clean. His record, though technically sealed, would still haunt him. He'd never get a security clearance job, never pass a background check without sweating, and he'd never be able to look me in the eye again. I didn't show up for the court date. I didn't need to. The silence of my absence was louder than any statement I could have made in person. My mom didn't get charged, at least not criminally. But the court made note of her involvement in the cover-up, and it made her a social pariah. According to Lauren, people started whispering at church. Her friends stopped inviting her to things. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid awkward conversations. The woman who once lectured me on reputation now had to live without one. I moved out of Dylan's place shortly after that. Got my own apartment on the other side of town. It wasn't much, a one-bedroom with a tiny balcony and a view of a parking lot. But it was mine. More importantly, I finally launched my studio. I called it Pillar Design, a name that meant stability, strength, and what I had to become when my own family failed me. Business took off faster than I expected. The article buzz gave me a visibility boost. I landed clients from 3 different countries in the first 2 months. Started consulting for a nonprofit that helps young adults transition out of toxic homes. Even gave a few guest lectures over Zoom for college design students. I built something out of the wreckage. Not in spite of the pain, but because of it. One night, I got a message from an unknown number. It was short. Just 3 words. I'm so sorry. No name. No follow-up. I didn't respond. I didn't block it either. I just let it sit there. A quiet echo of regret. Because by then, it didn't matter anymore. The revenge wasn't about destroying them. It wasn't about making them feel what I felt. It was about showing them what I wouldn't be anymore. Their scapegoat. Their peacekeeper. Their silent, forgiving doormat. They chose comfort over truth. I chose truth over them. And the truth set me free. I stood on my balcony that night, watching the sun dip below the skyline. The city buzzed quietly beneath me. Cars passing, lights flickering, life moving forward. I took a deep breath. The air was clean. The silence wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. I went back inside, shut the door behind me, and smiled. They took my money, but I took my life back. And I never looked back again. I'm Marcus, 28 years old, and apparently the only one in my family who still believes in honesty and basic decency. I work in IT, the kind of job where you don't really log off, just shift tabs between spreadsheets and life. For the last 5 years, I've lived in the same modest apartment about 30 minutes from my parents' place. And for just as long, I've been the guy who shows up when the Wi-Fi's down, the fridge is making a weird noise, or someone forgot to pay the electric bill and needs a last-minute Venmo to keep the lights on. I never complained, not really. I figured that's what family did. We helped each other out. That all changed over one dinner. It was a Sunday, the usual roast chicken, mismatched dishes, and the smell of lemon-scented pledge lingering from Mom's frantic cleaning spree. I was sitting at the table with my parents, my brother Sean, my Aunt Lena, and a few cousins. The kind of dinner where everyone talks over each other, and you smile more out of habit than joy. I'd been working late all week, barely sleeping, but I was excited for one reason: the trip. We'd been planning a family vacation to Greece for months. I chipped in $2,300 to help cover booking costs, flights, group accommodations, even a rental van my dad insisted would be more practical than taxis. My mom had mentioned it'd be a chance to reconnect. Just the core family, she said. Like old times. So, when there was a lull in conversation, I smiled, leaned in, and said, I'm so excited for the trip next week. I've been counting down since we booked it. The room went quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes before someone laughs at a joke. The kind that feels like the lights have gone out and nobody's telling you why. Sean looked at me and chuckled under his breath. You're joking, right? He said, nudging his fiancée like I'd just told the world's worst punchline. We got back yesterday. I blinked. What? My mom put her fork down slowly. Sweetie, that was all she managed to say before Aunt Lena, clearly trying to change the subject, pulled out her phone. Oh, the photos turned out so well, she said, scrolling through her gallery like it wasn't happening. She turned the screen toward me, and there it was, a sun-drenched family smiling on a cliff in Santorini. Everyone was there. My parents, my brother and his fiancée, Aunt Lena, and Uncle Derek. Even the twins, who supposedly couldn't get time off school. Everyone, except me. I sat there for a second, heart hammering, brain trying to make sense of it. I remembered the last group chat update, 2 weeks ago, where my mom said, still finalizing dates, we'll loop back this weekend. I'd followed up twice after that. No response. I assumed they were just busy. I pushed my chair back. Slowly, deliberately. No one stopped me. No one said a word. Not even Sean, who muttered something that sounded like drama queen as I walked past. I drove straight home. Didn't even change out of my dress shirt. I sat on the edge of my bed for what felt like hours, staring at nothing. I wasn't sad, not at first. Just empty. You ever have a moment where you realize everyone you thought was in your corner had quietly stepped away and you didn't even notice? That was me, right then. I kept replaying little things. Mom telling me she'd let me know the final itinerary. Dad calling me the reliable one when he asked for my card to finish the booking. Sean brushing off questions about the travel dates with a vague, I think Mom's got it. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat in silence and let the numbness settle in like dust. The next morning, I went through my finances. I hadn't really looked at how much I'd been covering over the past year, but it hit me hard. Rent money for Sean, just for 2 months. A new fridge for my parents when theirs went out. Groceries, easily $200 a month. All those will pay you back, promises that turned into jokes. I realized I'd been the family safety net, and they hadn't even thought I was worth an invitation. I didn't go to work that Monday. I called in and took a sick day, not sick in the usual way, but emotionally disoriented. I sat with a spreadsheet and made a list. Everything I'd paid. Every account where my name was tied to theirs. Netflix. Family phone plan. Even the car insurance I was still subsidizing because it's cheaper under one policy. Then I started cutting. By Wednesday, the Netflix account password had changed. By Friday, the group phone plan was split. I transferred my number out and let the rest lapse. Insurance? Canceled. I'd warned them in writing. No one responded. I closed the joint emergency fund I'd created when Mom had her knee surgery. All $5,700, mine. I even froze my Zelle and PayPal accounts so they couldn't accidentally request money again. The only time anyone reached out was Saturday morning. Mom called once. I let it go to voicemail. She didn't leave a message. The next family dinner came and went. I didn't show. Neither did my usual grocery delivery. Then, exactly 1 week later, Sean showed up at my apartment. I heard the knock and checked the peephole. There he was, standing with that same smirk he always wore when he thought he had the upper hand. Dude, he said, the moment I opened the door. You're seriously blowing this out of proportion. It was a last-minute thing. We didn't think you'd be able to go. I stared at him. You told me the trip was next week. I helped pay for it. He rolled his eyes. You make good money. You don't even go out much. What's the big deal? You're acting like we betrayed you or something. I didn't answer. Just stood there. He huffed. Whatever. Mom's freaking out. She says you're acting cold. Just come over, eat some chicken, and pretend it didn't happen like the rest of us. That was the moment something snapped inside me. A kind of calm, measured fury I didn't know I was capable of. But I didn't lash out. I didn't yell. I simply said, tell her I'm busy. Like you all were when you boarded that plane. And then I shut the door in his face. The next morning, I woke up to a flood of messages. First from Mom. A long text with passive-aggressive guilt buried between faux-concerned lines. We didn't want to stress you out. You've always seemed so tired lately. We thought you'd appreciate the quiet time instead. Then came Dad, trying his usual no-nonsense tone. We needed someone here in case of emergencies. Someone had to be the responsible one. That one made me laugh bitterly, as if I'd volunteered to be the family watchdog while they drank ouzo by the Aegean Sea. Then Aunt Lena chimed in with a group message. We all thought you knew. It was a misunderstanding, Marcus. Don't make this into something it's not. I didn't respond. Not a single word. Instead, I spent the rest of the day doing what I should have done years ago. I dug up every account, every joint login, every payment plan I'd ever been talked into. You'd be amazed how deep the web goes when you're the dependable one. My name was on the backup credit card for my parents' emergency dental expenses. I was the guarantor on Sean's first car loan. The one he crashed 3 months later, then dumped into my lap with a, "You're good at paperwork. Can you figure it out?" I'd been their fixer, their safety net, their invisible punching bag. That night, I pulled out the old fireproof folder I kept under my bed. Inside, copies of receipts, canceled checks, emails confirming bookings, screenshots of unpaid balances. I opened a fresh Google Drive folder and uploaded everything. Every transaction, every date, every lie, and I labeled it all. The vacation fund. It wasn't about exposing them, not yet, but it was my own way of documenting just how long I'd been taken for granted. Proof that I wasn't imagining things, like Mom loved to suggest when things got uncomfortable. A few days later, I got a knock at my door. I didn't answer it. I didn't need to. I watched from the peephole as Mom stood there, holding a takeout bag like a peace offering, shoulders hunched like she was carrying the weight of guilt, or just trying to look like it. She stood there for 5 minutes, knocked twice, then walked away. I didn't move. I didn't open the door. I didn't even breathe until the elevator dinged. That night, something interesting happened. I logged into the shared bank app, one used to help manage my parents' utilities. The one I'd given them access to just until they got back on their feet. The one that still had about $6,000 in it. They'd never closed it because they thought I wouldn't notice the little withdrawals. $40 here, $85 there. For household stuff, they'd say. I transferred every cent into a new account under my name, then shut the old one down. Minutes later, I got a call from Dad. I let it go to voicemail. His voice was tight, clipped. "Marcus, what happened to the account? Your mother tried to pay the water bill, and it was declined. This is getting ridiculous. We need to talk." But we didn't talk. Not that night. Not the next. Over the next few weeks, the silence grew louder. I didn't block them, not yet. But I stopped responding. No calls. No texts. No Sunday dinners. The fridge stayed stocked with food I liked. My calendar was no longer filled with last-minute, "Can you help us move this?" requests, or "Can you drive me to the airport?" favors. I reclaimed my time, my peace, my space. But then came the breaking point. The one that really told me they hadn't learned a thing. I got a notification from my credit monitoring service. A new inquiry had been made under my name. From a travel agency. A very specific one, the same one they used for Greece. At first, I thought maybe it was a mistake. But then I checked my email. There it was, plain as day. A forwarded message chain from Sean. He'd accidentally CC'd me on a conversation with the agency, asking if they could rebook a similar package for the next family trip, and, wait for it, if they could use the same card Marcus paid with last time. The nerve. The audacity. I stared at the screen for a long time, my jaw tight, my chest cold. That's when it clicked. They never felt guilty. Not really. They missed the convenience of me, the money, the reliability, the buffer I provided between their irresponsibility and reality. So I did what I had to do. I reported the attempted authorization, flagged it as unauthorized use, called the agency, explained that no trip should be charged to that card, ever. Then I froze the card entirely and requested a new one. Next, I logged into my backup Google account, the one no one knew about. I uploaded the vacation fund folder to a private link, and I started drafting something I never thought I'd write. A formal email to every family member. It wasn't angry. It wasn't bitter. Just factual, detailed, calculated. I laid out the timeline of lies. The money, the exclusion, the debt, the expectations. I didn't yell in all caps. I didn't insult them. I just held up a mirror and let them look. But I didn't hit send. Not yet. I wanted them to sweat. Because something else was brewing. Something bigger. A turning point they wouldn't see coming. And this time, they wouldn't just lose my money. They'd lose me entirely. And just as I was deciding how to time that final move, my phone lit up with a call from Aunt Lena. Not a message. A real call. I stared at the screen for a second, unsure why she of all people was suddenly trying so hard to reach me. I answered. "Marcus," she said, voice trembling slightly. I think you need to know what your mother just did." I didn't say a word. "Your parents just applied for a personal loan. Under your name." I closed my eyes. The storm had finally arrived. And this time, I wasn't just going to weather it. I was going to burn the whole system down. I didn't speak for a solid 10 seconds after Aunt Lena dropped that bombshell. My brain tried to process it, but it was like trying to unscramble a radio signal through static. My mother, had just tried to take out a personal loan in my name. Not ask for help. Not request a favor. She forged my information, or worse, used credentials I'd given her in confidence. "How do you know?" I finally managed to ask, my voice flat, almost detached. "She asked me to co-sign," Lena said, her voice trembling. "She said it was for a family emergency. That you were on board, but your credit wasn't enough alone. Something about consolidating bills, I think. I don't know, it was all fast. Too fast. I got suspicious and called the bank myself. I rubbed my eyes. Pacing the room in slow circles like that would somehow make it less surreal. I shouldn't have been surprised. All the signs had been there. Years of quiet entitlement, veiled insults wrapped in advice, and the unspoken rule that Marcus would clean up whatever mess they made. She actually went to a bank and tried this? I asked again, still needing to hear it out loud. "She did, Marcus," Lena said quietly. And when I hesitated, she got cold, like snapping fingers cold. Told me it was none of my business and that I was just making things harder like always. That's when I knew something was off. And then I remembered you weren't even in Greece. I thought, maybe it's time someone actually told you what's really going on. My stomach twisted. "Thanks for calling," I said mechanically. "I should have done it sooner," she whispered. "You deserve better than this." We hung up. I stared at my phone screen until it dimmed, then sat down at my desk and opened the folder again. The vacation fund now had a new section, fraudulent activity. I added Aunt Lena's name, the date of the call, and what she'd said. Then I opened a blank document and started typing a timeline. Every loan, every transaction, every favor they'd forgotten to pay back. I attached screenshots of Zelle requests, Venmo receipts, bank transfers. I had receipts for everything. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about the fact that my mother, the woman who used to hum lullabies while brushing my hair as a kid, who once told me I'd be the glue of this family, had tried to rip me off behind my back, and still expected me to smile at Sunday dinners like nothing happened. That night, I made 2 calls. One to my bank, and another to a lawyer I knew from college who now handled identity theft cases. The kind of guy who didn't blink at family messes. I gave him a basic rundown. He didn't sound surprised. "You'd be shocked how often this happens," he said. "Especially when your name is tied to your parents financially. They start treating it like their property. You're doing the right thing. Paper everything." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "I already have most of it." "Good," he said. "Now keep going." The next morning, I woke up to 19 unread messages. The first was from my mother. "Why did Aunt Lena call you? You don't know the full story. It's just temporary. We were going to talk to you this weekend. Please don't overreact. You're being cruel right now." That last one made me laugh out loud. "Cruel? Me?" Then Sean chimed in. "You're blowing this way out of proportion. You always do this when things don't go exactly your way. Just fix it already and stop acting like a victim. You're embarrassing, Mom." I didn't reply. I archived the messages. Then, like clockwork, my dad emailed me. Not a call. Not a text. An email. Subject: "Let's be adults about this. Marcus, we understand you're upset, but this drama is unnecessary. Families go through things. Mistakes are made. You've always been the mature one. Don't throw that away now. Please call your mother. She's crying. Let's handle this like we used to. Quietly. Privately. Love. Dad." There it was. The same language they'd always used when they needed me to swallow something bitter for the sake of family. But I wasn't that person anymore. I was done staying quiet. Done solving problems I didn't create. I reopened the draft email, the one with the link to the full financial archive. And this time, I added a single line at the top in bold, black font. This is everything. I'm out. But I still didn't hit send, because something else had shifted. A few hours later, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it ring once, twice. I almost declined it, but something told me to pick up. Marcus. It was a woman's voice. Polite. Professional. This is Kelly from Summit Lending Group. We just wanted to confirm that you've submitted a formal dispute for a personal loan application made under your name yesterday. I inhaled sharply. Yes, I did. There was a pause. All right, thank you for verifying. We've flagged the application for internal review, and due to the circumstances, we've temporarily frozen any further loan requests on your credit profile. I do want to let you know that the applicant listed your phone number as a cosigner confirmation contact, so if anyone tries again, you'll be notified immediately. Did she list herself as the applicant? Yes, the woman caught herself. I'm not at liberty to name individuals at this stage, but let's just say you've done the right thing initiating the dispute. Thank you, I said quietly, then hung up. And that's when it all clicked. They thought they'd get away with it. Again, just like they always had. But this time I had leverage, and I was about to use it in a way they'd never see coming. I didn't wait long after the call from Summit Lending. The moment I hung up, I knew the waiting was over. The time for subtlety had passed. I opened the draft email once more, looked at the quiet threat wrapped in polite wording, and realized it wasn't enough. Not anymore. They needed to feel it. Not just the inconvenience of missing Netflix or a bounced water bill. They needed to understand what it felt like to be invisible until needed. To be sidelined, forgotten, used. Then expected to come back with open arms and an open wallet. I took the draft, polished it into something sharper, still calm, still professional, but final. Then I added every recipient. My parents, Sean, Aunt Lena, Uncle Derek, even the cousins who had the audacity to smile in those Santorini pictures, knowing full well I hadn't been invited. I CC'd my lawyer, too, and blind copied myself. Then I pasted the link to the Google Drive at the bottom. Before hitting send, I added a closing line. This isn't about money anymore. This is about respect, the one thing I never got from any of you, even after years of giving everything I had. Don't contact me again unless it's through a lawyer. I clicked send. It was done. For the first time in years, I felt a clean, unshakable peace. The fallout came quickly, faster than I expected. Within hours, my phone buzzed with call after call. I silenced it. When I checked voicemail later, I had 11 new messages. The first 3 were from Mom. Marcus, sweetheart, please. We need to talk. This isn't how families solve things. Marcus, this is your mother. You're being manipulated. Lena's filling your head with garbage. Then one where her voice broke completely. I never meant to hurt you. Please, don't leave us like this. Next was Sean. His tone swung between smug and panicked. Dude, you're nuking the family over a vacation? Grow up. Then, you're a selfish little freak. You always were. Followed by, okay, fine. Just tell me what you want. I'll make it right. The one that stood out came from my dad, surprisingly brief. I underestimated you. I'll admit that now. Just remember this. Bridges don't rebuild themselves. That night, I changed my number. I told my lawyer to move forward with a cease and desist to stop any future attempts to use my information or financial details. He helped me secure an identity theft protection service and walked me through locking down my credit across all 3 bureaus. I also filed a formal report with the FDC and submitted a statement of fraud with the bank. It turned out Mom had used my social security number, likely from an old W-2 I once left at their house years ago. It was identity theft. There was no dancing around it. And there were consequences. About 3 weeks later, my lawyer forwarded me a notice. The bank had denied the loan application permanently and opened a fraud inquiry. If the investigation confirmed the details, and it would, there would likely be legal repercussions. Fines, a potential civil case, maybe even criminal charges, depending on how far my parents had gone. I didn't feel guilty. Not for a second. They had always counted on my silence. My restraint. My love. But love without respect is just obligation. And I was done being obligated. As for the rest of the family, Aunt Lena called a week after everything blew up. She sounded tired but relieved. I'm sorry, Marcus, she said softly. I should have stepped in sooner. I think I was afraid of shaking things up. But you were right to do what you did. I told her she didn't owe me an apology, just honesty. She promised to stay in touch, but I didn't hold her to it. That side of the family had always followed the same script. Protect appearances, protect the hierarchy, protect the lie. Eventually, I moved. I changed apartments. Took a better job across town. New lease. New neighborhood. New life. Nobody knew the address except a few close friends, and, eventually, Aunt Lena. The air felt lighter there, like I'd finally stepped out of someone else's expectations and into my own. The silence was beautiful. No last-minute phone calls about broken air conditioners. No emergency transfers for unforeseen expenses. No guilt-laced invitations to fake Sunday dinners. Just quiet. But I didn't just disappear. I made sure they felt it. 3 months after everything unraveled, I got an email from Sean, the first message I'd received since changing my number. Subject: the drive folder. Marcus, we got the lawyer's notice. The damage is worse than you think. Mom is depressed. Dad's furious. The house might have to be sold. The loan they tried to take out was tied to refinancing plans. Now their credit's shot. Thanks to you, none of us can move forward right now. I hope you're happy. Sean. I read it once. Then again. Then I opened my reply window and wrote exactly 6 words. You said I wasn't invited. Goodbye. Then I hit send. After that, nothing. No calls. No letters. No more half-baked apologies. Just silence. And in that silence, I found something I'd never had while living under their roof or financing their chaos. Freedom. Real, unshakable freedom. Not the kind you announce on social media or put in a diary, but the kind that settles deep in your bones. The kind that tells you you're not crazy, not bitter, not broken. You're just done. And finally, for once, they're the ones who have to sit in it. Not me. I used to think my family wasn't that different from anyone else's. A little loud, occasionally petty, sometimes too nosy for their own good. But what family isn't, right? At least, that's what I told myself. You learn to brush things off. Laugh it off when your mom makes a backhanded comment about your clothes. Shrug when your dad pretends not to hear you over your brother's latest accomplishment. You tell yourself they don't mean anything by it, that they love you in their own way. But there's always a moment, a very specific, cutting moment, when the illusion finally shatters. Mine happened over roast chicken and red wine at a dinner table I didn't even want to sit at in the first place. My name's Derek, I'm 31, and I work in software development. Nothing glamorous, but I'm good at it. I live alone, I make a comfortable income, and I've been lucky enough to carve out a peaceful little life for myself in the city. I like quiet mornings, long bike rides, and tinkering with old video game mods on weekends. I'm single, yes. Not by some tragic accident. Not because I'm undateable, as my family sometimes jokes, but because after a particularly messy breakup in my mid-20s, I decided I'd rather be alone than with someone who made me feel small. Apparently, that mindset never sat right with my parents. See, in my family, my younger brother Connor is the golden child. He's 28, charming in a greasy car salesman kind of way, always talking loud enough for everyone to hear how busy, important, or stressed he is, even when he's between jobs. Which, to be fair, is often. Somehow, he's always about to land something big. But in the meantime, he's been floating on a mattress of soft expectations and my parents' bottomless well of excuses. The kind of guy who thinks ambition is a personality trait, but can't wake up before 11 a.m. without a Red Bull and a guilt trip. Mom dotes on him. He's just figuring things out, she says, even though he's crashed 3 cars and ghosted 2 landlords. Dad likes to pretend he's tough on him, grumbling about Connor's irresponsibility while pouring him another glass of bourbon and slipping him a $100 bill when he thinks no one's looking. I used to be angry about it, but I've grown numb over the years. Until recently, I was even helping Connor out myself, quietly, behind the scenes. 3 years ago, after he got evicted from yet another apartment, I started covering part of his rent under the agreement that he'd pay me back when he got back on his feet. I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents, not my friends. Just kept sending the money each month like a fool. Anyway, this particular dinner wasn't supposed to be dramatic. It was my mom's idea, a family night at their house now that Connor was finally doing better. The invite came with guilt baked right into it. We never see you anymore, Mom had texted, even though I'd come by just a few weeks earlier. It'd mean a lot to your father. I almost declined. I had a stressful project going live that week, and honestly, I just didn't have the energy for the usual passive-aggressive comments and performative small talk. But guilt is a powerful thing, and so I showed up, dressed nice, brought a bottle of wine, even offered to help with dishes. Dinner started out as expected. Polite conversation about work, the weather, a new neighbor who had the audacity to paint their shutters turquoise. I mostly kept quiet, nodding and smiling. Dad asked how my job was going, then cut me off halfway through my answer to ask Connor if he was still talking to that recruiter in Atlanta. Connor, of course, launched into a dramatic story about how he almost got flown out for a six-figure role, but they wanted someone with more niche experience, or something. The usual smoke and mirrors. Mom beamed at him like he was auditioning for American Idol. I was chewing on a piece of chicken when it happened. Connor leaned back in his chair, sipped his wine, and looked at me with that smug grin he wears like cologne. Still single? Huh, he said, real casual. Must be lonely being a failure. He chuckled. Like it was a harmless joke between brothers. Like it wasn't a deliberate shot across the table in front of our parents, who both gave soft, knowing laughs like he'd just said something cheeky and clever instead of cruel. I blinked. Fork halfway to my mouth, heartbeat suddenly loud in my ears. For a second, I didn't say anything. Just stared at him, wondering what kind of person could say something like that with a straight face, especially after everything I'd done for him. Everything I'd sacrificed. The jobs I'd passed on, the vacations I didn't take, the countless times I said, yes, when I should have said, are you kidding me? I felt the heat rising in my neck. My first instinct was to laugh it off, pretend it didn't sting. But something in me snapped instead. Quietly, cleanly, like a final thread breaking in a sweater you've been tugging at for too long. So I set my fork down, wiped my mouth with my napkin, looked my brother dead in the eye, and said, funny coming from a guy whose rent I've paid for 3 years. Not anymore, by the way. You could have heard a pin drop. Connor's face froze, the smirk evaporating like steam. Mom's mouth fell open in slow motion, like a cartoon. Dad set his wine glass down a little too hard. The silence was deafening. And for the first time in a very, very long time, I felt something sharp and cold and strangely satisfying settle in my chest. Control. But that was just the beginning. Because what I said at that table, that wasn't revenge. That was a warning shot. A single crack in the dam. I didn't know it yet, but that dinner would become the turning point in everything. The way my family saw me, the way I saw myself, and the way all our dirty little secrets came tumbling out like junk from an overstuffed attic. You think you know your family until money's involved, until pride's on the line, until someone decides they're done being the doormat. And I was done. So done. But what came next, even I didn't see it coming. Let me tell you how it all unfolded. Mom was the first to break the silence, though she didn't so much speak as gasp. It was theatrical, as if I'd confessed to robbing a bank or kicking a puppy. Derek, she hissed, clutching her pearls. Okay, not literally, but she might as well have. Why would you say something like that? I just looked at her. Calmly. Quietly. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't gloat. I wasn't interested in causing a scene for the sake of it. I was tired. Not angry. Not bitter. Just done. Connor, meanwhile, was still frozen. The smugness had drained from his face entirely, replaced with something between confusion and indignation. He looked like a magician whose trick had failed mid-performance, caught off guard that I'd pulled back the curtain in front of the audience. I don't know what you're talking about, he stammered finally, laughing nervously and glancing at our parents for support. Derek's exaggerating. Am I said, folding my napkin and setting it beside my plate. Because I've got the bank records if you need a refresher. Every month. On time. Like clockwork. My dad cleared his throat sharply, the universal dad signal for enough. He hated confrontations. Always had. If it couldn't be solved with a raised eyebrow or a passive-aggressive silence, he wanted no part of it. We don't need to rehash all that at the dinner table, he said, not looking at me. Of course not. Because when Connor makes a dig, it's just boys being boys. But when I clap back with facts, suddenly it's inappropriate. I leaned back and smiled politely. Right? Sorry. I forgot we don't talk about actual problems here. Mom stood up then, flustered, grabbing my plate even though I hadn't finished. Why don't I get dessert? She said too brightly, her voice wobbling. I made that lemon tart you like. I'm not really hungry anymore, I replied, and the second the words left my mouth, I saw the flicker of hurt in her eyes. And here's the thing, I didn't want to hurt her. That's the part that stung the most. She was my mother. But somewhere along the way, she'd stopped being a mom and started being a PR manager for my brother's failures. Every gathering, every conversation, every compliment, filtered through Connor first. His victories were paraded. My stability was ignored. I'd spent years being the quiet, reliable one, the background character in my own family, and I was just supposed to keep smiling through it. That night, I left early. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't hug anyone. I got in my car and just sat there for a while, watching the lights in the living room flicker through the blinds. I thought about all the birthdays I'd spent organizing gifts for both of us, while Connor forgot mine entirely. About the time he totaled his car, and I lent him mine for 6 months without asking for gas money. About the week our dad had surgery, and I took time off work to help around the house, while Connor showed up 2 days late with a hangover and a half-eaten burger. It wasn't just the rent. It was everything. 1,000 tiny moments that had piled up over the years until I couldn't tell where the resentment ended and my spine began. The next morning, I got a text from Mom. "We need to talk." That was really uncalled for last night. Not "how are you feeling?" or "I didn't realize things had gotten that far." No, it was my behavior that was the problem. I didn't reply. Over the next few days, the silence grew heavy. I didn't get my usual Sunday check-in call. No guilt-trippy recipe photos. No "saw this and thought of you" messages. I should have felt guilty, but instead, I felt something close to relief. For once, the emotional labor wasn't mine to do. I went to work. I hit the gym. I cleaned my apartment and listened to old jazz records and watched a documentary on mountain climbers who risked their lives just to stand alone at the top of the world. And for the first time in a long time, I actually understood the appeal. Then, on Thursday, Connor called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hey," he said, his voice all strained and performative, like he was already preparing for the Emmy-winning monologue. "Can we talk?" "I think we're doing that now," I replied, pouring myself a cup of coffee and keeping my tone neutral. There was a pause. I didn't know you felt that way," he said finally. "If you were struggling with something, you could have just told me." That made me laugh. I couldn't help it. "You're serious?" I said, sitting down. "I was struggling? Connor, I was covering your rent because you begged me to. You promised you'd pay me back. You told me not to tell Mom and Dad because you were handling it like a man. And then you mocked me at dinner in front of them? That's not struggling. That's using me." "I didn't mean it like that," he muttered. "No, you meant it exactly like that. You wanted the applause without doing the work. And you've always gotten it. That's not my fault, but I'm done pretending I don't see it." He was quiet for a second. Then, "So what? You're cutting me off." "Yup," I said. "Rent's on you now. Grow up." He hung up. I expected backlash. I expected anger. But what I didn't expect was the campaign that followed. First came the calls from Mom. "Connor's been having a really hard time lately, Derek. He's not as strong as you are. He just needs a little more time." Then came the group texts, suddenly revived after months of silence. "Connor got a flat tire on his way to a job interview. Can anyone help? Connor's apartment might have mold. Do you know any lawyers? Connor's feeling really low today. Just letting you boys know." Every message like that was a pebble tossed into my shoes. Small, annoying, but impossible to ignore. It wasn't helpful communication. It was pressure dressed up as family concern. Emotional blackmail with a smiley face. At one point, Mom called me while I was at work and actually said, "You're being really selfish right now." Selfish. The word made my skin crawl. I'd given so much. Time, money, peace of mind. And now that I wasn't giving more, I was the problem. "I'm not selfish," I said calmly. "I'm just not a doormat." Click. A few days later, I got a notification from Venmo. Connor had requested $800. Just the word "please" in the memo line. I didn't respond. An hour later, he texted me, "Really? After everything I've done for you?" That one sent me into a full-blown spiral. I paced around my apartment for 10 straight minutes, trying to wrap my head around the sheer gall of it. Everything he's done for me? Like what? Borrow my headphones and never return them? Crash on my couch for a week that turned into 3 months? Introduce me to a girl he later tried to hit on behind my back? My therapist once told me that narcissists rewrite history to suit their version of events, and if you're not careful, they'll make you doubt your own memories. I used to think she was being dramatic. Now I wasn't so sure. The final straw came a week later. I'd taken a Saturday off to relax. No work, no calls, just a lazy morning with coffee and an old video game I hadn't played in years. Around noon, there was a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, there stood Mom, purse slung over her shoulder, wearing a look of wounded disappointment so practiced it could have been bottled and sold. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, stepping past me without waiting for permission. I blinked. Hi." She walked straight into my living room and sat down like she owned the place. "I came to talk," she said, face to face. I stood there baffled. "About what?" She looked at me, her eyes already brimming. "Connor's been struggling. Again. He might lose his apartment. He told me you cut him off, and now he's behind on bills. He's embarrassed. He didn't want me to come, but I had to." I stayed silent. Let her finish. "He made a mistake, Derek. But we help family. That's what we do. You've always been the responsible one, the strong one. Please, just until he's back on his feet." I sat down across from her, letting the weight of her words settle like dust. "You want me to keep paying for his lifestyle because he's too proud to admit he's never grown up," I said slowly. "You want me to undo the only boundary I've ever set because it makes you uncomfortable." Her lips tightened. "That's not fair." "No, it's not," I said. "None of this has ever been fair. But I'm not playing along anymore." She stared at me for a long moment. Then she stood up. "I hope you can live with yourself," she said coldly. And she walked out. No hug. No goodbye. Just the heavy click of the door closing behind her. I sat there for a long time after she left. No music. No distractions. Just silence and the creeping realization that something fundamental had shifted. Not just in my family dynamic, but in me. For the first time in my life, I'd said no and meant it. No caveats. No apologies. And that was when I realized they weren't just upset because I stopped helping. They were upset because they never thought I'd stop. But oh, they were in for a surprise. Because I was only just getting started. A week passed. No calls. No texts. No unexpected door knocks. For the first time in months, maybe years, there was silence. And silence, as it turns out, can be both comforting and terrifying. I thought I'd feel free, liberated even, after finally standing up for myself. But instead, I found myself watching my phone like it was a ticking bomb, waiting for the next guilt trip or veiled accusation. But nothing came. At first, I assumed they were giving me space. Maybe they were actually reflecting. Maybe Mom was starting to see the imbalance. Maybe Connor was having a long overdue mirror moment. I even began to feel a bit of hope. Foolish, in hindsight. Because what I didn't realize was that the silence wasn't space. It was strategy. They weren't retreating. They were regrouping. It started with a phone call from Aunt Rachel, my mom's sister, the unofficial family gossip line, and someone I rarely spoke to outside of the holidays. She was always nice enough, but her loyalty was with my mother through and through. So when her name popped up on my phone on a Thursday evening, I hesitated. Answering it felt like walking into a conversation that had already been scripted. "Hi, sweetheart," she chirped, overly cheerful. "Got a minute?" I braced myself. "Sure, what's up?" "Oh, I was just talking to your mom the other day. She's so worried about you. Said you've been distant. Cold." I told her. That doesn't sound like Derek. He's always been such a sweetheart. "Uh-huh," I said, already regretting picking up. "Well, things have been a little tense lately." "Oh, I heard," she said in that sugary tone people use right before a character assassination. "About the money. You poor thing. You've always been so generous. It must be hard, feeling like no one appreciates you." That caught me off guard. "Thanks," I said slowly. "But honey," she added gently, "you know your brother's had a hard life. All those ups and downs. It's just who he is. You can't change him. And your mother, well, she's always tried her best, hasn't she? Maybe she doesn't always say the right thing, but she's only human." And there it was. The subtle shift. The backpedal from "you were right" to be the bigger person. "I'm not trying to change anyone," I said. "I'm just done sacrificing my peace for people who don't respect me." She sighed. Of course. I just hope you don't let one little family spat turn into something bigger. You know how time slips by? People grow old. Regrets pile up." I didn't say anything, because I could feel it. This wasn't just Aunt Rachel reaching out. This was a message, hand-delivered and guilt-wrapped, from Mom herself. They'd enlisted the cavalry. The family charm offensive had begun. Over the next few days, it snowballed. My cousin texted me out of the blue asking if I was okay. An old family friend I hadn't spoken to since college left a comment on one of my Facebook posts. Families fight, but love wins in the end. I even got an actual email, from my uncle, the subject line, just some thoughts. Inside was a long-winded essay about forgiveness, spiritual growth, and how holding grudges makes you bitter, not better. It was surreal, like they'd formed a campaign committee behind my back. But I kept quiet. I didn't argue. I didn't post cryptic quotes or write long rants. I just watched it all unfold, growing more disillusioned by the day, until the betrayal came. It was a Friday afternoon. I had just wrapped up a long Zoom call and was looking forward to a quiet evening when I got a call from my landlord. That alone was odd. He rarely called, preferring emails for anything transactional. I answered, and his tone was tense from the start. "Derek," he said, "I just wanted to give you a heads up. Your brother dropped by today." My stomach tightened. "Connor?" "Yeah." "Said you'd given him permission to come by and pick up some stuff. Said he'd lost his key and needed access. He seemed convincing. Had your last name, your address, everything." "What?" I said sharply, already standing up. "What did he take?" "Well," the landlord said hesitantly, "nothing, luckily. My maintenance guy happened to be here and called me just in case. I told him to hold off. Figured I should check with you first." I stood there in stunned silence, trying to process what I'd just heard. Connor had tried to break into my apartment, using my name, using our relationship, and not even to confront me, just to sneak in. My voice was cold when I finally responded. "Thank you for calling me. He absolutely did not have permission. If he comes by again, don't let him in. And please call the police if he pushes it." The landlord sighed. "I figured it might be something like that. Family drama. Something like that," I muttered. I hung up and stared at the wall for a solid minute. My heartbeat was loud in my ears, not from fear, but from fury. That was the line. That was the line. It wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't about snide remarks or favoritism or even emotional manipulation. This was violating trust. And I knew exactly where he'd gotten the idea, Mom. Maybe not directly, but I could feel her fingerprints on it. The desperation, the entitlement, the assumption that I wouldn't do anything about it, that I'd fold, like I always had. They thought I'd bark. They didn't think I'd bite. I called Connor immediately. He didn't pick up. I called again. Voicemail. On the third try, he finally answered, his voice groggy and defensive like I'd just woken him from a nap he didn't earn. "Yo, you tried to get into my apartment." Pause. Then a scoff. "What?" "No. My landlord called me. Said you claimed I gave you permission." Another pause. "I just needed to grab something," he said finally, like that somehow justified it. "I left a few things there last year. You said I could come back for them anytime. Last year. Not today. And not without telling me. You tried to lie your way into my home, Connor." "Oh, come on, man. Don't be dramatic." I felt my hands clenching into fists. "You trespassed. If the maintenance guy hadn't been there, you might have gotten in. What then? You start going through my things? Steal from me? Crash on my couch again? You're blowing this out of proportion," he snapped. "You think you're so perfect now, huh? Just because you've got a little money and your own place." "I earned all of it," I said, voice shaking. "While you were wasting chances and burning bridges, I was working. And I kept helping you. I kept helping you, even when you didn't deserve it. And this is what you do." He didn't answer, so I hung up. Then I blocked him. Not just on my phone. On everything. Social media, email, even our shared family Spotify plan. Petty, maybe, but symbolic. I was done pretending we were brothers in any meaningful way. Blood means nothing without trust. Then I texted Mom. "Connor tried to break into my apartment today. This is no longer about money. This is about safety. I've blocked him. Please respect my boundaries, or I will go no contact with you too." No reply. Not for hours. And when it finally came, it said, "You know your brother didn't mean any harm. Don't destroy this family over a misunderstanding." That was it. No apology. No outrage. No motherly concern that her younger son had tried to deceive his way into her older son's home. Just a plea to not destroy the family. As if it hadn't been slowly corroding for years. As if I was the one holding a match, not standing in the ashes. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake replaying every moment, every red flag I ignored, every time I'd brushed off the favoritism as just how it is. They didn't care about me. They cared about keeping the machine running. And now that I'd stopped fueling it, they were ready to let me go. But I wasn't going to slink away quietly. No, I had a plan. And it was time to let them see what happened when the failure stopped playing nice. I won't lie to you. After that last message from Mom, something inside me cracked. Not in the loud, dramatic way you see in movies. There was no shouting, no throwing of plates, no sudden urge to scream into the void. It was quieter than that. More hollow. Like discovering your favorite childhood book was full of pages you'd never noticed before, and they all painted you as the villain. I sat on my couch that night with all the lights off. Just the faint glow of the street lamp bleeding through the curtains, and the hum of my fridge filling the silence. I don't know how long I sat there, but when I finally stood, my legs felt heavy. Not physically, emotionally. It's strange how grief works. Because that's what it was, grief. Not for a person, but for the idea of something. The idea that your family is supposed to be your anchor. The people who show up, who care, who protect you. And when you realize they're not, when you finally admit they never really were, it feels like a death, not of a person, but of a version of you who still hoped. I didn't go to work the next day. I called in sick and stayed in bed until noon. Not even scrolling on my phone, just lying there. My mind was a swamp. No clear thoughts, no anger, no plans, just a weight. The kind that makes even brushing your teeth feel like a monumental task. But eventually, routine won. It always does. I got up. I ate something, cold leftover pasta, barely palatable. I showered, though the water felt too hot, and the bathroom mirror too cruel. And then, I sat back down at my desk and opened a blank document. I didn't know what I was going to type. I just needed to do something. What came out wasn't a letter. It wasn't a rant. It was a list. A list of everything I'd done for Connor over the past 10 years. The apartment rent, obviously. $800 a month for 36 months. $28,800. The car repair I covered when he crashed into a mailbox? $2,400. That time I paid off his credit card because he was being harassed by collectors? $5,100. Countless dinners, gas fill-ups, Uber rides, and emergency bailouts. Conservatively, $3,000 more. Total, $39,300. And that was just the financial part. There was no column for emotional labor. No line item for all the times I stood between him and Dad's rage when he missed another deadline. No valuation for the countless times I bit my tongue at family dinners while he made me the punchline. No invoice for the weekends I spent helping him move, or rewrite his resume, or edit his cover letters. I stared at the number on the screen. Nearly $40,000. That could have been a new car, a vacation, a down payment, a life. And I'd handed it over piece by piece like it was candy at Halloween. The worst part? He never once said thank you. Not once. Not meaningfully. Maybe a casual thanks, bro, here and there, usually followed by, I'll get you back. But never eye contact. Never acknowledgement. Never accountability. The rest of that week was a blur. I went back to work, but I kept my head down. Declined happy hours. Skipped gym sessions. Turned off social media. My phone vibrated here and there, but I didn't check it. I couldn't. Every notification felt like a dagger waiting to be unsheathed. But the world doesn't stop spinning just because you're in emotional quicksand. On Monday, my boss pulled me aside after our morning meeting. You okay? He asked gently. I nodded. Just a rough week. He didn't press. Take Friday off. Use it as a mental health day. I nearly teared up. Not because I needed the day, though I did, but because he noticed. My boss, a man with 50 other employees and a mountain of deadlines, had noticed something was off. And my own mother had responded to a potential break-in with, "Don't destroy this family." That contrast haunted me. So I took Friday off. But not to mope. I drove out of the city, 2 hours north, to a lake I used to visit as a teenager. It wasn't anything fancy, just a secluded spot near a worn-out dock, the kind of place that didn't show up on tourist maps. I packed a sandwich, a notebook, and a blanket. No music. No laptop. Just me and the sound of wind through trees. I sat by the water for hours. Watched ducks glide past. Through pebbles. Let the breeze tug at my sleeves. And somewhere between sandwich bites and the third failed attempt at skipping a stone, I decided something. I was done reacting. Done just enduring things. Because that's what I'd been doing my whole life. Enduring. Smiling through it. Minimizing my own discomfort to keep the peace. Making myself smaller so others didn't feel inadequate. Shrinking in rooms I should have stood tall in. I was the nice one. The responsible one. The one who didn't need anything. But that wasn't strength. It was self-erasure. And now, I was going to rewrite that. It started small. I canceled the shared Spotify family plan. The notification alone must have sent a ripple through the group chat, but I didn't care. I changed my Netflix password. Removed every device. I updated my bank account security questions. Called my landlord to put a note in my file. Do not let anyone access my unit unless confirmed by voice. I even reached out to a lawyer I'd met at a conference months ago, just for advice. Not legal action, yet, but to ask, what would it take to legally distance myself from family? What protections existed if a sibling became a threat? What lines had to be crossed? She was helpful, not alarmed. In fact, she sounded like she'd had this conversation before, and that alone comforted me. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. This wasn't some petty feud. This was survival. Around that time, something strange happened. Connor disappeared. Radio silence. No texts. No calls. No random Venmo requests or accidental tags on social media. For a moment, I thought maybe he'd finally gotten the message. Maybe he'd moved on. Or maybe mom had reined him in. But I should have known better. Because Connor doesn't disappear unless he's planning something. And I was about to find out just how deep that rabbit hole went. The first sign came through LinkedIn, of all places. A colleague messaged me with a screenshot. Hey man, weird question, didn't your brother apply here last year? Thought you'd want to see this. The screenshot was of Connor's profile. Except the bio had changed. It now listed him as a freelance software consultant with experience in AI development, product management, and back-end architecture. With 3 projects listed underneath, my projects. From my portfolio. With altered dates and company names. He'd literally stolen my work. Phrased it like his own. Even quoted some of the language I'd used in a past conference talk. Word for word. I stared at the screen, pulse pounding. For a second, I thought maybe it was a glitch. Some bizarre error. But no, it was intentional. Connor had turned himself into a watered-down version of me. A Frankenstein's monster stitched together with pieces of my accomplishments. And suddenly, I knew why he'd gone quiet. He wasn't gone. He was becoming. At least, trying to. I messaged him. Not to scold. Not to confront. Just, you need to take my work off your profile. Now. No reply. I gave it an hour. Then I emailed the companies he listed, most of which I'd consulted for, and sent them my original work with timestamps. One responded immediately. The VP wrote, "Thanks for flagging this. That name sounded familiar. We'll handle it." I didn't know what handle it meant, but I trusted it would make a dent. The other shoe dropped 2 days later when I got a call from my mother. "What did you do?" She snapped, no greeting. "Excuse me. Connor said you got him blacklisted. He was just trying to build a new career. He admired your work. He thought you'd be proud." I almost laughed. Proud? He impersonated me, Mom. He stole from me. "You always twist things," she hissed. "No wonder no one wants to be around you anymore." And with that, she hung up. No wonder. No wonder. That one stuck with me. Not, "I'm disappointed." Not, "That was wrong." But no wonder. It was the first time I realized she'd made her choice. There was no middle ground anymore. No mother torn between sons. Just a woman protecting her favorite, and a man realizing he was now free. Because once you've hit rock bottom with the people who raised you, there's a strange clarity that settles in. You stop hoping for the apology. You stop rewriting your past. And you start writing your future. Quietly. Strategically. No fanfare. No warnings. You simply begin. And trust me, that's what I was doing. It's funny how rock bottom, once it settles beneath your feet, can become solid ground. I'd spent years running on a treadmill of guilt and obligation, always feeling like I was behind, like I was one favor away from finally being accepted. But now that the treadmill had stopped, now that I'd stepped off it for good, I realized how much energy I'd been wasting just to stand still. And once I stopped pouring into them, I had so much left for myself. It didn't happen overnight. There was no sudden montage of me in sunglasses, getting promoted, dating a supermodel, and walking away from explosions in slow motion. Real life doesn't work that way. But the shift was real, and it was lasting. The first real change came quietly, on a Wednesday morning. I'd been working on a side project for months, a machine learning tool for automating customer support analysis. Nerdy, I know, but it had real value. My idea was to help mid-sized companies parse through customer tickets and flag recurring issues using a mix of sentiment analysis, and keyword clustering. A mouthful, but in practice, it meant turning noise into strategy. I'd built the MVP alone. Nights, weekends, on breaks between Zoom calls. And now, finally, it was ready. I posted a short video demo on LinkedIn, not expecting much, just putting it out there. By noon, the video had over 3,000 views. By Friday, it had 27,000. A week later, I got a message from a startup accelerator asking if I was open to pitching the tool at an upcoming tech showcase. Me, pitching. A year ago, I would have hesitated, told myself I wasn't ready. Maybe even asked Connor to help, because he always liked being on stage. But now I knew better. I said yes. I spent 2 weeks preparing that pitch like my life depended on it. I trimmed the fat, polished the UI, practiced my timing. I even rented a decent jacket, something sharp, something clean, and cut my hair for the first time in months. It wasn't about looks, not really. It was about reclaiming something I'd let slip away, self-respect. The day of the showcase, I walked into that room full of polished founders and sleepless developers with one thought in my head. You have nothing to prove to anyone but yourself. I nailed the pitch. 15 minutes. No stumbles. No filler. By the time I walked off stage, I already had 2 people handing me cards. A third messaged me that night with a question about integration. A week later, I had a small angel investor ready to write a check for $50,000 in exchange for early equity. I couldn't believe it. Well, I could. I'd built it. I knew the value. But for once, I let myself enjoy the moment. Not in a performative way. Not because I wanted my parents to finally say, "We're proud of you," but because I was proud of me. And that was new. I used part of the money to upgrade my apartment. Not move, just enhance. A proper standing desk. Ergonomic chair. Replaced my ancient laptop with a beast of a machine that ran everything like butter. Got a noise-canceling headset that made Zoom calls feel like private conversations in a vault. Slowly, my home began to feel less like a holding cell and more like a headquarters. I started taking care of myself in other ways too. I signed up for therapy again, this time with someone who specialized in adult children of emotionally manipulative families. I hit the gym not out of shame, but because it felt good to move again. I read books, cooked actual meals, took long walks at sunset without checking my phone. Bit by bit, I was building a life where I didn't just survive, I existed. And the best part? No one in my family knew. I had gone dark, quiet, off the grid, and it was the most peaceful silence I'd ever experienced. I expected Mom or Connor to try again. Another guilt message, another phony crisis, but nothing came. Maybe they finally realized I wasn't bluffing. Or maybe, more likely, they just assumed I'd circle back eventually like I always had. After all, that's what I did, right? I was the stable one, the good son, the one who always came home. But I wasn't that person anymore. And eventually, I knew I'd have to show them. I didn't plan for the opportunity to come when it did. It was about 6 months after I launched the product. Let's call it Query Pulse. And we'd just landed a pilot deal with a mid-tier SaaS company that wanted a full implementation. It wasn't earth-shattering money, but it was real money. Enough to hire 2 contractors to help build out the dashboard and support requests. One of them was an old college friend named Rachel, sharp, no nonsense, and one of the best UX designers I'd ever worked with. The other was a quiet back-end dev I found through a Discord server, and within weeks, we were moving like a real team. Momentum built fast. Users started coming in. So did feedback. Some critical, some glowing, but all of it useful. I set up a newsletter, a blog, even started recording small video tutorials. Not flashy, not viral, but clear, useful, honest. The kind of thing I would have needed when I was starting out. That's when the podcast invites began. Small shows at first, indie tech hosts, startup junkies. But the audience was loyal, curious, engaged. One host, a guy named Leo who ran a show called Bits and Pieces, asked me to do a deep dive episode on solo founder resilience. It was supposed to be a 30-minute chat. We ended up talking for 2 hours. It was the most open I'd ever been publicly about burnout, manipulation, and the emotional cost of carrying other people's failures. I didn't name names, didn't throw my family under the bus, but I told the truth, that I used to think being strong meant never saying no, that guilt had kept me tethered to people who drained me, that walking away wasn't abandonment, it was survival. When the episode dropped, I expected some quiet feedback, maybe a few DMs. Instead, it exploded. I got emails, dozens, from people who said they saw themselves in my story. A founder whose brother kept stealing from his company. A woman who'd spent 20 years covering her father's debts. A guy whose mother guilt tripped him into giving up a job offer so he wouldn't move too far away. It hit something real. I hadn't meant to become a voice for anyone. I just wanted to breathe. But now that I had, others were breathing, too. Around this time, I got a message on LinkedIn from someone with a familiar last name. A recruiter from the company Connor had tried to impersonate me at. He said, simply, "We spoke with someone last year who misrepresented themselves. Thanks for flagging it. If you ever want to talk about opportunities, the door's open." I politely declined. I wasn't looking to be an employee anymore. But I did smile when I read it. Because that was justice. Not revenge. Not spite. Truth. And the truth, when you stand in it long enough, becomes armor. Still, I didn't reach out to my family. Even as I grew. Even as Query Pulse gained traction. Even as I began getting invites to speak at small tech conferences, share lessons, talk shop. I stayed quiet. Because I didn't need their applause. I didn't need them at all. But life, as always, has a sense of timing you can't predict. One Sunday morning, I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. Subject, "Your family wants to talk." No body. Just that subject. Attached, a scanned wedding invitation. Connor's wedding. To a woman I'd never heard of. In 3 weeks. No RSVP link. No personal message. No note from mom. Just my name, the date, and a reminder that family is forever. And that's when I knew they needed something. Because if they truly wanted to reconcile, they'd have picked up the phone, written a letter, showed remorse. But this was a baited hook. And I had no intention of biting. Still, I wasn't going to ignore it. Because sometimes, the best way to reclaim your story is to show up on your own terms. And this wedding? Oh, it was going to be the perfect stage. Not for revenge. Not for drama. But for truth. Because the man they expected to walk in through those doors, the quiet, agreeable brother who never made waves, he was gone. And in his place, someone who didn't need their approval to be whole. Let's talk about the wedding. But first, let me be clear, I had no intention of going. Not at first. When that email landed in my inbox with Connor's wedding invite coldly attached like a corporate memo, I almost laughed. After everything they'd done, after the lies, the emotional warfare, the fake LinkedIn profile, the attempted break-in, they thought I'd show up to smile for pictures? But as I sat there staring at that RSVP-less PDF, a realization hit me. They weren't inviting me because they missed me. They were inviting me because they needed me. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a setup, a display, a stage for Connor to finally win. The prodigal failure returns triumphantly, now mature, responsible, married. And me? I was meant to be a silent extra in the background. Maybe even a tool for his redemption arc. Look, even Derek came. They'd say, as if the broken relationships and betrayal had all just been silly misunderstandings that time had healed. But time hadn't healed anything. It had sharpened everything. So I said yes. Not with a reply. Not with a phone call. I clicked print, circled the date with a red marker, and tacked it to my corkboard like it was a deadline. Because I wasn't just going to that wedding. I was going prepared. And I wasn't going as Derek, the quiet, responsible older brother. I was going as me. The first thing I did was a little digging. If I was going to walk into enemy territory, I needed intel. So I went to where all family secrets eventually leak. Facebook. Mom still had me blocked. So did Connor. But Aunt Rachel? Still wide open. And a habitual oversharer. Her timeline was a goldmine. Photos, status updates, cryptic subtweets about some people forgetting where they came from. It was all there. But the real nugget came from a comment thread beneath a blurry photo of Connor holding a wine glass on what looked like a hotel balcony. A friend had commented, "Wow, big spenders. Is that the 4 wins?" To which Aunt Rachel proudly replied, "Yes, wedding and honeymoon all in one, courtesy of a very generous family friend." That made my eyebrow twitch. Connor? Getting married at 4 Winds? That was a luxury resort north of the city. Ocean View Suites. Michelin-starred catering. Not exactly. I'm 3 months behind on rent, kind of money. So who was this generous family friend? I Googled the venue. Bookings were listed publicly for events. The weekend of the wedding was blocked for a private party under the name Glenridge Holdings. And that's when the puzzle clicked. Glenridge Holdings was owned by Richard Barlow, a real estate investor who also happened to be one of Dad's old golf buddies. I remembered him. Bald, loud, always boasting about being self-made, even though his first 4 properties were gifts from his father. Barlow had money, influence, and, evidently, a soft spot for Connor. I dug deeper. Turns out Connor had been interning at one of Barlow's smaller property firms. Unpaid, of course, but with all the Instagram posts, you'd think he was running the company. I even found a quote in a local business article where Barlow referred to him as a promising young leader. My jaw clenched. That was my phrase. I'd once used it to describe a junior dev during a podcast episode. Word for word. He was still stealing from me. But now, he was wearing it as a costume. Polished, rebranded, and preparing to walk down the aisle in a tailored suit paid for by a man who probably thought he was investing in the next tech entrepreneur. I stared at the screen. Then I smiled. He was bluffing. Connor's entire empire was made of borrowed phrases, borrowed money, and borrowed time. All I had to do was pull the right thread. Over the next 2 weeks, I worked quietly. I didn't announce anything. Didn't tell my friends. Didn't post vague quotes on social media about revenge or karma. I simply got to work. First, I built a portfolio site for myself. Clean, elegant, professional. Then I uploaded every major project I'd ever worked on, especially the ones Connor had borrowed on his resume. Each entry was timestamped, backed up with Git logs, original client contracts, and screenshots. Next, I wrote a short blog post called How to Spot a Fake Founder. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't bitter. It was helpful, educational. The kind of post that quietly dismantles people like Connor without naming names. But the examples? Very specific. Same tools, same phrases, same projects. Then I tagged it with SEO terms like Query Pulse, B2B fraud, and yes, Glenridge Holdings intern. I didn't need it to go viral. I just needed one person from Barlow's network to read it. And I made sure that would happen. I emailed a copy of the post, under a pseudonym, to the Glenridge Holdings press email with a polite message that said, "Thought you might want to vet your next rising star. Integrity is everything in real estate, isn't it?" No signature, no return address, just a digital whisper in the right ear. The wedding was held on a Saturday. Hot, humid, and smug. I wore a charcoal gray suit. No tie, clean shave, hair slicked back with just enough gel to show I cared. I arrived 10 minutes early, just as the string quartet started warming up. The venue was beautiful, I won't lie. Flower arches, ivory linens, gold-plated cutlery. Connor had gone all in. Or rather, Barlow had. I walked in alone. No date, no entourage, just me and the version of myself they never bothered to see. Mom spotted me first. She was standing near the reception table, clutching a clipboard like a stage manager. When her eyes landed on me, I saw it, that flicker. Surprise. Panic. A desperate mental scramble to figure out why I was there and what I might do. But she smiled. Too wide. "Derek," she said, walking over. "You made it. That means a lot." "Sure," I said calmly. "Wouldn't miss it." I watched her scan my outfit, my posture, my eyes. She was looking for a crack, for a tell, something to confirm her suspicion that I hadn't come in peace. But I gave her nothing, just a serene smile and a sip of champagne. She gestured toward the seating chart. "You're at table 9, near the back, but great view of the dance floor." Of course I was. I walked over. Table 9 was practically behind a pillar. My card had a typo. "Derek," I smiled. They were still playing games. But not for long. The ceremony began. Guests settled. Connor walked down the aisle beaming, arm in arm with his bride, a woman I'd never met, wearing a $10,000 dress and a look of curated joy. The vows were flowery, rehearsed, full of vague promises about growth and honesty. I nearly choked on my champagne. Then came the reception. Drinks, dancing, speeches. Dad gave a bland toast. Mom told a story about Connor's resilience. And then, the microphone passed to Connor himself. He stepped up, tapped the mic, cleared his throat. "I just want to say," he began, "that none of this would have been possible without the people who believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. Richard Barlow, for taking a chance on me. My parents, for supporting me through every twist and turn. And my beautiful wife, for seeing the man I could become." He paused, then smiled in my direction. And even my brother, Derek, who I may not always see eye to eye with, but who's always been an example of hard work and consistency. We don't say it enough, but I admire you, man. A polite smattering of applause. And for a moment, it almost seemed sincere. Until I saw his smirk as he handed the mic back. That's when I knew. He wasn't thanking me. He was using me, painting the narrative, publicly, positioning himself as the grown-up, the one who'd made peace, the one who'd turned it all around. The guests clapped. Mom nodded, misty-eyed, and Connor looked at me like he'd won. That's when the projector screen flickered on behind him. The room quieted, and there it was, a slideshow, photos of the couple, childhood memories, Connor's work, including a slide, oh yes, of one of my projects, labeled as his. My pulse slowed. I stood up, walked calmly toward the AV table, and tapped the tech guy on the shoulder. Switch to this, I said, handing him a USB. Per the groom's instructions. Updated presentation. He hesitated, then nodded. I stepped back. The screen changed. From a photo of Connor at a laptop, to a screen capture of my website, querypulse.com. Timestamps, screenshots, contracts, and at the bottom, a side-by-side comparison of Connor's LinkedIn profile and mine. Every phrase he'd copied, every project he'd renamed. Silence fell, then gasps. The screen changed again, this time to the blog post. How to spot a fake founder. A beat. And then, Richard Barlow stood up, walked over to Connor, and whispered something in his ear. Connor's face turned gray, then red, then a weird pale yellow, like someone who's just realized the floor beneath them was never solid. He turned toward me, jaw slack. I tilted my head, raised my glass, and toasted. To truth, to peace, to walking away, not as a victim, but as a man who finally knew his own worth. The fallout wasn't loud. That's what surprised me most. It was quiet. No screaming. No public scene. No wine glasses flying through the air like in a soap opera. Just silence. After the final slide faded off the projector screen and the last murmurs died down, the wedding reception stumbled forward like a drunk trying to remember the steps of a dance. Someone turned off the screen. The music started again, tentative, confused. Waiters brought out dessert trays as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. Connor disappeared. He left the mic on the floor and walked out through the side doors, jacket unbuttoned, one shoe dragging like he was halfway out of his own skin. I watched him go, then sat back down at my table and ate the lemon tart they served me like it was the most natural thing in the world. Across the room, Mom stood frozen, her face stuck in an expression that was trying to decide between fury and shame. She didn't approach me. Not right away. She just stood there, gripping her wine glass, her eyes darting to the door Connor had vanished through, then to me. Aunt Rachel looked like someone had just yanked the emergency brake on her worldview. Mouth agape. Fork Madère. Dad. He stayed seated at his table. Didn't say a word. Didn't even look at me. And that said everything. Eventually, Mom came over. Her heels clacked against the marble floor like accusations. She didn't sit. Just hovered above me like a thundercloud. You couldn't let him have one day, she said. No greeting. No, what was that? I met her eyes calm. Didn't he already have every day? Her mouth opened, closed. I kept going. He stole from me. Lied about me. Tried to break into my home. You ignored all of that. And now you're mad because I told the truth. You embarrassed him, she snapped, voice trembling. In front of everyone. He embarrassed himself, I said. I just held up the mirror. She stood there a moment longer, then, without another word, turned and walked away. That was the last time we spoke. The next week, my phone stayed quiet. No family calls. No late-night texts. No attempts at damage control. They'd closed ranks. I expected it. What I didn't expect was what came next. 3 days after the wedding, I got an email from Richard Barlow's assistant. Polite. Short. Mr. Barlow would like to schedule a brief call to discuss a potential consulting opportunity. He was very impressed with your work. I blinked at the screen, reread it 3 times, then exhaled through a laugh. Of course, because while Connor was licking his wounds, Richard had clearly done what any businessman does when his investments collapse. He looked for a better one. We set up the call. It lasted 15 minutes. He asked smart questions. I gave clear answers. He said he'd read my blog post, recognized the problem, and wanted to explore a partnership between QueryPulse and a portfolio of his companies. Nothing official yet, but a few introductions could go a long way. When we hung up, I just sat there at my desk for a moment, thinking about how far I'd come and how far I was going. Weeks turned into months. Connor resurfaced eventually, quietly, with a new job title at a smaller company. His LinkedIn went private for a while. The next time I checked, his bio had changed dramatically. No more fake projects. No more buzzwords. Just a modest title, Customer Success Manager. No mentions of me. I knew he hated it, but I didn't gloat, because I wasn't angry anymore. That was the true revenge. Not the slideshow, not the ruined wedding speech, but the fact that I had let go, and he couldn't. He was still trying to climb ladders he hadn't earned. I was building my own tower. Mom never reached out. I got a Christmas card from Aunt Rachel that year, just a generic Happy Holidays, with no personal note. A photo of her dog in a Santa hat. I laughed when I saw it. Not bitter, just amused. Dad sent nothing. And Connor? He never apologized. But I didn't need one. Because by then, I had something better. I had peace. Real peace. The kind you don't trade for proximity. The kind that comes from drawing lines and holding them, even when it's lonely. Especially when it's lonely. And I had built a life that was mine. Fully. Finally. The last time I saw any of them was by accident. 8 months later, at a small tech conference downtown. I was giving a talk on integrity in software development. A short Q&A followed. When I stepped off stage, I saw them, Mom and Connor, standing near the exit. They didn't approach me, didn't smile, just watched. Like I was a movie they didn't understand anymore. I met their eyes, nodded once, then turned and walked the other way. Not out of spite, not out of anger, but because I finally could. And as I stepped outside into the sun, my phone buzzed. An email from a VC firm in San Francisco. Subject line, interested in learning more about Query Pulse. I smiled, tucked the phone in my pocket, and kept walking. Not toward them, not away from them, just forward, on my own path, at my own pace. Finally free. I'm Sam, 32, and if I had to describe my family in one word, it would be performative. Outwardly, we look like the kind of tight-knit, suburban clan you see on Facebook Christmas cards. The matching sweaters, the forced smiles, the overused captions about gratitude and family first. But peel back even one layer, and you'd see the truth. It's all one big performance. My mom, especially, lives for appearances. Everything is about how things look, never how they actually are. My older brother, Derek, is the golden boy. Married at 28, first house at 30, 2 kids by 33. He posts pictures of his perfect family so often, I'm not sure if he remembers how to be present in real life. My younger sister, Lila, is the princess, spoiled, coddled, and now pregnant with her first child at 26. She's the baby, and our mom never let her forget it. Me? I'm the middle child. The forgotten one. The one who stopped showing up to things unless I had to. No kids. Not married. No plans to settle down anytime soon. Apparently, that makes me selfish. I work in IT. Remote, decent income, nothing flashy. I have my own place, and I keep to myself. I learned a long time ago that trying to get emotional support from my family was like trying to squeeze water from a stone. I used to think that maybe, if I succeeded enough, they'd start to see me. But no, my achievements weren't interesting. I wasn't interesting. Not unless I could be used for something, a ride, a loan, a last-minute babysitter. Or, more often lately, a contributor to the family fund. That was Mom's new favorite thing. Pooling resources from all 3 kids to cover shared expenses, which somehow always meant bailing out Derek and Lila. Mom called it being a team. I called it what it was, emotional blackmail wrapped in guilt and expectations. The baby shower was a perfect example of everything I've come to resent. It was held in Lila's backyard, the whole thing color-coordinated and dripping with those over-the-top Pinterest vibes. Balloon arches, custom cookies with the baby's name on them, even a professional photographer. Of course, it wasn't Lila or her husband footing the bill. I'd heard from Dad, in a rare moment of honesty, that Derek had helped out financially, and I knew from past experience that meant I was about to be asked to help too. But no one had asked me directly yet, so I kept quiet. I showed up on time, gift in hand, dressed nice but not too nice. I figured I'd keep a low profile, say the right things, and get out early. But of course, Mom had to put on a show. "Oh wow," she said loudly when I walked in, just as a few of Lila's friends turned to look. "Sam actually made it." I thought you'd be too busy with one of your solo adventures. I forced a smile. Nice to see you too, Mom. She waved me off with that fake laugh she saves for company. You know I'm just teasing. Then came Derek, holding a beer like he owned the place. Still single, huh? He said as he hugged me one-armed. You should try dating a human being instead of your laptop. Again, the smile. Tight-lipped. Still not funny, Derek. Come on, he grinned. Loosen up. You're so serious all the time. I wanted to say, maybe because every time I show up, you treat me like a punchline. But I bit my tongue. I always do. The first real slap in the face came during one of those weird baby shower games. The kind where everyone's supposed to guess baby stats and give parenting advice. Mom stood up and started handing out little slips of paper with prompts. Mine said, "What's one thing you're excited to teach the baby?" I hadn't even picked up a pen before Mom clapped her hands and said, "Oh, maybe Sam can teach her how to ghost people. He's a pro at that." There was laughter, too much of it. Even from Lila. Even from people who barely knew me. I set the paper down. "I'll pass," I said quietly. Lila leaned in with a smirk. "Ah, come on, don't be sensitive. It's just a joke." "Yeah," Derek added. "Don't be that guy." I stood up and excused myself, saying I needed air. I ended up walking around the block twice. When I came back, I stayed on the edges. Avoided conversation. I smiled when the photographer came around. I even helped carry out the cake. Because that's what I do. I show up, take the hits, and keep the peace. But something cracked that day. Something deep. The final straw came after the gifts. Lila was opening a huge box from Derek, a fancy baby monitor system with built-in night vision and 2 cameras. Everyone oohed and awed. Then she got to mine. A simple but well-made baby wrap from a brand I knew was ethically produced and comfortable, something practical. She pulled it out, blinked, and looked at the tag. "Oh, this is nice," she said, and immediately set it aside. Someone made a joke about how Aunt Lila deserves the best, and Mom chimed in again. "Well, what do you expect? Sam doesn't really get the whole family thing." That stung, but not as much as what came next. Mom laughed, holding her phone like she was about to film. "I mean, let's be honest, you'll never give me grandkids anyway, right?" Derek, sipping his beer, didn't even look up. He's too selfish to be a dad. There it was. The line. The cut they'd been dying to make all day. A silence fell over the table, but no one said a word in my defense. Not even Dad. Not a single one. I stood up, placed my plate down, and nodded. "Got it." And I left. No yelling. No drama. Just a clean walk to the door and back to my car. No one followed. No one called. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. What I did feel was tired. Not the kind of tired a nap fixes, but the kind that settles into your bones after years of trying to earn love from people who only ever notice your absence when they need something from you. I went home, took a long shower, ordered food, didn't respond to the one message Lila sent. A blurry picture of her gift table with the caption, "Thanks for coming." The next morning is when everything started to unravel. I woke up to 47 unread messages in the family group chat. I almost laughed. "Derek, mortgage is due. Where's your share?" "Mom, Sam, we need to talk. You can't just disappear and refuse to contribute." "Lila, seriously? Just because you didn't like a joke?" "Derek again, don't be petty. You OWE this family." That word again. "Oh." I typed one reply. "Ask the future father of the year. I'm too selfish to help." Then I muted the chat. What happened next? Well, that's when things really started to burn. I didn't check the group chat for 3 days after muting it. Honestly, I didn't care to. I figured they'd blow off steam, gossip behind my back in the sibling side chats I was never included in, and move on. That's how it always went. But when my cousin Tara texted me privately with, "Hey, are you okay? Your mom's been saying some stuff." I opened the chat, mostly out of curiosity. And yeah, it was worse than I thought. Mom had gone full martyr mode. Message after message about sacrifices and how ungrateful some people are, sprinkled with vague quotes like, "A family is only as strong as its weakest link, and some people only show up when it benefits them." I wasn't mentioned by name, but the implication was as subtle as a brick. Lila added fuel with some passive-aggressive remark about how some people can't handle not being the center of attention, and Derek, of course, had to throw in, "You wouldn't be living so comfortably if it weren't for everything Mom and Dad did for you growing up." Comfortably? My apartment was 900 square feet, above a loud coffee shop, with a broken heater and one working window. Meanwhile, Derek lived in a 5-bedroom house his in-laws helped him finance, and Lila was still living rent-free in mom and dad's basement while her husband found himself. But sure, I was the one living in luxury. Still, I stayed quiet. I thought that maybe if I ignored it, the drama would fade. But it didn't. Instead, Mom started doing this thing where she'd loop me into one-on-one texts with guilt-laced reminders. Lila's baby shower photographer ended up being way over budget. We all agreed to chip in, remember? I hadn't agreed to anything. I'd never even been asked. But the phrasing made it seem like I'd missed a vote I was expected to attend. Then came the utilities. Derek's water heater broke again. I told him you'd help this time since he covered last Christmas dinner. He hadn't. I had. I'd Venmo'd $300 that night to make things easier. Apparently, that had been quietly erased from the family memory. Each message was like a tiny thread pulling at a very old wound. And the worst part? I realized they genuinely didn't see it. They didn't think they were mistreating me. In their minds, I was just being cold, difficult, ungrateful. Because the moment I stopped saying yes to everything, I became the problem. Then came the real kicker. A week after the shower, I got a call from Dad. That in itself was unusual. He rarely called. He's the quiet type, more bark than bite, but not exactly emotionally present. "Hey, son," he started, in that stiff tone he always used when he was about to say something he didn't believe in. "Your mom says you've been a little off lately." "I'm fine," I said, already dreading where this was going. "She's just worried, that's all. Says you're pulling away from the family." I sighed. "Dad, did you hear what they said at the shower?" There was a pause. "Well, you know your mother. She jokes around." "And Derek." Another pause, longer this time. "Then, he's just under a lot of stress. 2 kids, mortgage, long hours. And that gives him permission to insult me? Don't be so sensitive, Sam." I closed my eyes. There it was. The golden phrase. Don't be so sensitive. A lifetime of being brushed aside, minimized, rewritten under that single label. "I'm not sensitive," I said slowly. "I'm just tired." Dad didn't respond. Just exhaled and changed the subject. "Anyway, your mom's planning a family dinner. Everyone's coming. She wants you there." "Why?" "So we can all talk this out. Clear the air." I already knew what that meant. Sit down, take the blame, and make peace, even if nothing changes. "I'll think about it," I lied. I didn't go. That dinner came and went, and when I didn't show, the fallout was instant. Mom sent a long message. "I can't believe you didn't come. Your sister cried. Derek made a toast, hoping you'd walk in." It was humiliating for us all. No mention of what I might be feeling, just how it made them look. Lila followed up with, "This is supposed to be a happy time for me. Why are you making it about you?" That was the moment something hardened in me. They didn't just expect me to support them. They expected me to erase myself while doing it. And suddenly, the guilt that used to keep me tethered, the guilt that kept me showing up to things I wasn't welcome at, paying for things I never agreed to, laughing off comments that chipped away at my dignity, it started to lose its grip. I stopped replying. Not just to the group chat, to everything. Calls, texts, emails. I let them stew. I focused on work, on friends, on people who didn't treat me like a resource to be drained. For a while, it was quiet. Too quiet. Then, slowly, they escalated. Mom started messaging me at odd hours. "I had a nightmare that you cut us off. Please, don't do that." Followed by, "Your silence is hurting us all." Then Derek started dropping links in the chat to GoFundMe pages for emergency repairs on his house, tagging me. "Every little bit helps, bro." As if we'd spoken recently. As if we were close. Lila sent ultrasound photos. No message. Just the images. A subtle reminder that this was the moment I was supposed to step up and become Uncle Sam. Cute. Manipulative. Then Mom tried a different tactic. "We're short on rent this month. I know you said you didn't want to be involved, but this is serious." Wait, rent? That confused me. I thought they owned their home. They'd always said so, but I didn't ask. I didn't want to give her a chance to spin another web of half-truths. But something about it nagged at me, because if they were short on rent, something bigger was going on, something they weren't telling me. And then, one night, I got a text from an unknown number. It was a screenshot of a Craigslist ad. "Room for rent, basement unit, private entrance, available immediately." The address? Mom and Dad's house. That's when the puzzle started to come together. I stared at the ad, rereading it 3, for times. Then I looked at the date it was posted. 2 days before the baby shower. So while they were mocking me for being selfish, for not giving them grandkids, for not being the golden child, they were quietly planning to rent out part of their house. Which meant Lila and her husband had to move. Which meant they were planning to ask me for a place to stay. The idea hit me like a gut punch, the realization that they didn't just expect money from me. They expected space, a place to land, rent-free, no doubt. And just like that, everything they'd said at the baby shower shifted into place. It hadn't just been cruelty. It had been justification. They were laying the groundwork, rewriting the story in real time so that when they came knocking, when they asked for something outrageous, it wouldn't seem like manipulation. It would seem like charity. I shut off my phone. I had a lot to think about. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling. That Craigslist ad burned into my mind like a warning shot I hadn't seen coming. They hadn't just disrespected me. They were preparing to use me. Again. But this time it wasn't for a few $100s or a quick favor. This time it would be my home. I spent the next few days hyper-aware. Watching. Waiting. I didn't say anything to them. Not about the ad. Not about the texts. Not about the subtle guilt-laced photos and links. I just observed. And what I saw was a family circling like vultures around a plan. Only I wasn't supposed to know I was the carcass. Then, a week after the baby shower, the dam broke. I came home from running errands, arms full of groceries, and saw something strange. A white SUV parked in my designated spot in front of my building. I didn't recognize it at first, until I saw the bumper sticker. Proud Dog Mom, in glittery cursive. That was Lila's car. And when I walked into my building, up the stairs to my floor, heart pounding with confusion and a deepening dread, I found Derek standing at my apartment door, holding a baby car seat. Empty, thankfully. What are you doing here? I asked, setting the bags down. He smiled like this was all perfectly normal. Hey, bro, figured we'd beat traffic. Mom said you were expecting us today. The floor dropped from under me. Expecting you? Yeah. To crash for a while. Just until things stabilize at home. I blinked. What do you mean crash? What's happening at home? He shrugged, like it was no big deal. The basement reno didn't work out. Some zoning issue. They're turning it into a rental for real now. Parents are stressing. Mom said you had the space. I what? Lila's voice rang out from behind him. We brought our own air mattress. And diapers, so you won't have to buy anything. I couldn't move. Couldn't speak. Just stared as my brother and pregnant sister stood at my doorstep with a car full of belongings, expecting to move in, because my mother had told them it was fine. They'd brought nothing official. No lease. No agreement. Not even the courtesy of a conversation with me beforehand. Just assumptions. Entitlement wrapped in a smile and a diaper bag. You were going to move into my home without even asking me. I finally said, voice tight. Derek looked genuinely confused. Mom said it was already handled. That you were happy to help. And you didn't think to confirm that with me? He laughed, actually laughed. Come on, Sam. Don't be dramatic. You live alone. You've got a second bedroom. It's just for a couple months. A couple months. I looked over his shoulder and saw Lila dragging a suitcase up the stairs. Her husband, silent, awkward, trailed behind her carrying 2 trash bags full of clothes. You're already moving in, I said, realization dawning. Derek looked down, sheepish now. Sorry. I know it's sudden. But with the baby coming, we need somewhere stable. Stable. And I was the stable one, right? The boring one. The one without a family. The one who worked remote, had space, and didn't need it. I looked at the bags, the car seat, the way they were already wedging the door open with a box of baby formula. And I snapped. You're not staying here, I said. Lila froze. What? You heard me. No one told me about this. You showed up like squatters. And you're not staying here. Her face twisted. You're kicking out your pregnant sister? Derek stepped forward. Sam, be reasonable. This is family. Exactly, I said. Family doesn't do this. I bent down, grabbed my grocery bags, and walked into the apartment, shutting the door behind me before they could even respond. They knocked. They texted. They called. I ignored every one of them. Eventually, they left. But it didn't end there. Because within an hour, Mom called me, screaming. How dare you turn them away like that? She shrieked. Do you have any idea what they're going through? I do now, I said calmly. After they showed up unannounced with half their belongings. I told them you were fine with it. You never asked me, Mom. You decided. Like always. It's your duty as their brother. It's not my duty to clean up your financial mess. That silenced her for about half a second. And then the flood came. Accusations. Guilt tripping. What happened to you? And you used to care, and maybe if you had a family of your own, you'd understand. That one cut deep, and she knew it would. That was the point. I'm done, I said finally. I'm not your backup plan. I'm not your safety net. You made this mess. You clean it up. Click. I sat in the silence after, my pulse racing. For the first time in my life, I hadn't just set a boundary, I'd enforced it. But I knew it wouldn't end there. Because people like my mom, they don't respect boundaries. They test them. And sure enough, she found a new way to do just that. 2 days later, I got a notice from my landlord. A formal complaint had been filed against me for unauthorized subletting activity. Apparently, someone had called and claimed I was running a rental operation out of my apartment. And I knew exactly who it was. When I read that notice from my landlord, my stomach twisted into knots. It was printed neatly on company letterhead, stapled to my door like a scarlet letter. Notice: allegation of unauthorized subletting. A warning, not an eviction yet. But the implication was clear. Someone had called my complex and told them I was illegally renting out rooms. I wasn't. But that didn't matter. In the eyes of property management, even the suggestion of policy violations was enough to paint a red target on my back. I had lived there for 4 years without a single issue. Paid rent early. Filed maintenance tickets politely. Never made noise. Never threw parties. And now, suddenly, I was under investigation. I took the letter inside and stared at it for 20 minutes. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't text my mom or Derek or Lila, though my fingers hovered over their names. I just sat in my kitchen, the soft hum of the fridge the only sound, and felt crushed under the weight of it all. They'd gone from guilt tripping to sabotage, and I couldn't even prove it. That's what made it worse. There was no way to trace who made the call. No recording. No name. Just an anonymous tip. But come on. Who else would do it? Who else would have any reason to hurt me like this, in a way that looked so casual, so clean, yet had the power to ruin everything? It was the kind of move Mom specialized in. Something she could deny if I confronted her, while still holding the satisfaction of knowing she'd gotten under my skin. That night, I barely slept. I couldn't stop imagining what would happen if I lost my apartment. My lease was month to month. They didn't need much of a reason to end it. What if I had to scramble to find somewhere else? What if I had to move cities just to get away from the cloud they'd cast over me? I opened my laptop, mind racing, and began looking up tenant laws. I read forums, Reddit threads, anything to reassure myself that I had rights, that I wouldn't lose my home over a lie. But the more I read, the more uncertain it all felt. Landlords don't need a trial. They just need an excuse. And a lie, repeated enough, can become very persuasive. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I called in sick. I couldn't focus. Couldn't work. I needed to be still. I needed to breathe. I made coffee, sat on the couch, and finally let myself feel everything. The betrayal, the shame, the old wounds of growing up in a family where love came with conditions and where boundaries were seen as insults. I thought about all the birthdays I'd spent feeling like a background character. All the times I'd been the designated driver of the family, not just in cars, but in life. The one who didn't mess up. The one who could always take a hit. The reliable one. The safe one. I thought about the moment at the baby shower. That look on Derek's face when he called me selfish. How easily it rolled off his tongue, like it was fact. Like it was something they'd all discussed behind closed doors and silently agreed upon. And then I thought about the real reason they'd turned on me. Because I'd stopped being useful. That was the crime. I had pulled away, not out of spite, not out of arrogance, but out of self-preservation. And to them, that meant war. I needed to get away, not just emotionally, physically. So I started looking, not for a new apartment, not yet, but for options, remote work hubs, rentals in other cities. I even entertained the idea of moving states entirely. Maybe I could sublet somewhere warm, live near the coast for a bit, start over. The idea felt radical, but it also felt like oxygen in a room that had been slowly choking me for years. But I knew better than to move on impulse. That's what they'd expect. A flailing response. A meltdown. Something to reinforce the story they told themselves, that I was the unstable one. The cold one. The failure. So I waited. I gathered documents. I took photos of my apartment, my belongings, my lease agreement. I printed bank statements, proving no payments had come in. I called the landlord, calm and measured, and asked for a meeting to clear things up. She was skeptical at first, said she had heard things. But when I laid everything out, she nodded slowly. No one's ever filed a noise complaint against you, she admitted. No traffic in and out. Frankly, this doesn't line up. I offered to let her inspect the place. No hidden guests, no extra beds. She waved it off. You seem honest, she said. I just had to follow up. And just like that, the fire was contained. For now. But something in me had shifted. Because the fact that they tried, and almost succeeded, made something inside me snap. Not in a way that made me want revenge. Not yet. But in a way that made me detach. I was done giving them power over me. That night, I opened my storage closet, pulled out the old moving boxes I'd saved, and started folding them together. Not because I was packing yet, but because I needed the reminder. I can leave. I have choices. I am not trapped. The next morning, I called a therapist. Her first available appointment was in 2 weeks. I booked it. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the tiniest spark of control come back to me. Not anger. Not rage. Just direction. The beginning of a plan. Because if they wanted to treat me like a villain in their story, fine. I'd be the kind that learns how to write his own ending. It's strange how quickly things start to shift once you stop waiting for permission to live your own life. The weeks after the fake complaint were quiet, at least on the surface. My family must have realized I wasn't backing down because the messages slowed. No more desperate texts. No more calls from blocked numbers. Even the group chat fell silent. It felt like standing in the eye of a storm. Too calm, too still, but I welcomed the quiet. For once, I had space to think, to breathe, and most importantly, to build. The appointment with the therapist came faster than expected. Her name was Lena, early 40s, calm voice, no-nonsense demeanor. I liked her immediately. In that first session, I didn't even talk about the baby shower. I started further back, the childhood stuff, the being overlooked, the way my wins were ignored and my setbacks used as weapons, the guilt that followed every boundary I tried to set. Lena listened, took notes, and then said something simple that cracked open something inside me. Your family doesn't need you to be healthy. They need you to be available. There's a difference. I sat with that for a long time. Over the next few sessions, we talked about enmeshment, about emotional roles in dysfunctional families, about the guilt that gets passed down like inheritance. Lena gave me language for things I'd always felt but could never articulate. And slowly, I began to untangle myself from the story my family had written about me. The story where I was selfish, cold, hard to love. I wasn't. I was just done bleeding for people who sharpened their knives on my back. At work, things picked up too. Maybe it was the therapy. Maybe it was the peace of not checking my phone every 5 minutes for a guilt trip. But I started performing better. Clearer mind, sharper focus. My manager noticed. Sam, your last 2 projects were outstanding, she said during our weekly sync. You've got a real knack for streamlining processes. Have you ever considered a lead role? I hadn't. I said yes. The promotion came with a raise. Not a massive one, but enough to change things. More autonomy, more respect. I was no longer just the quiet guy who kept the system running. I was leading. Around the same time, an old college friend, Marcus, reached out. We hadn't spoken in years, but he'd seen my profile on LinkedIn and was putting together a small team for a startup contract. I need someone I trust, he said. And you always got things done. I took the freelance gig on weekends. The extra income helped me build a cushion. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was stacking. Savings. Leverage. Options. And it showed. I upgraded some furniture in my apartment. Not flashy, just mine. A new desk, a better mattress, real artwork on the walls. Things that made the space feel like me, not just a stopgap between obligations. I also started doing things I'd put off for years. I booked a solo trip, Lisbon. 3 weeks. Remote work from cafes, evenings by the coast, 0 calls from family. I didn't tell anyone but my manager and therapist. The morning I flew out, I turned off my phone and stepped onto the plane with a duffel bag and a book I'd been meaning to read for 6 years. That trip changed something. Because for the first time, I felt what it meant to be unreachable, not out of spite, not out of fear, but out of choice. No one could guilt me into anything. No one could twist my day into theirs. I walked ancient streets, drank espresso under orange trees, and felt more like myself than I ever had back home. When I came back, I didn't even check the family group chat. I didn't need to, but it found me anyway. A few weeks after my return, I got a message from a number I didn't recognize. "Hey Sam, this is Mark, Derek's neighbor. He told me to reach out. There's been an incident." My stomach tightened. I called the number. Mark picked up. "Hey man, sorry to bother you. Derek gave me your number in case of emergencies." "What happened?" He sighed. "Pipe burst in their kitchen. Flooded a good chunk of the house. Mold risk. Insurance is taking forever. They're scrambling. Is everyone okay?" "Yeah, everyone's fine. But Derek said they might need a place to stay for a few days. Just until cleanup's done. He said you'd probably be okay with it." Of course he did. I took a deep breath. "Thanks for letting me know, Mark," I said. "But I'm not a backup plan. They'll figure it out." There was a pause. "Understood." I hung up. 2 minutes later, Derek called. I didn't answer. Then Mom called. I didn't answer. Then came the texts. "Can we talk? Your sister's pregnant, Sam. Where's your heart? I raised you. This isn't how you repay me." All of it. The same playbook, the same guilt, the same recycled lines. But this time, they bounced right off me. Because I wasn't that person anymore. I wasn't the Sam who crumbled every time someone said family. I was the Sam who'd built something of his own. Stability, space, peace. And they hated that I no longer needed them. They hated even more that, maybe, just maybe, I was finally happy without them. A week later, I got an email. From the family attorney. Subject line, preliminary estate review. Please respond promptly. I opened it, skimmed it, and stopped cold. Apparently, Mom and Dad were restructuring some financial assets, and they wanted to schedule a family meeting to discuss the future. And just like that, I realized what was happening. This wasn't just about crashing at my place. They were trying to reel me back in. Because what came next wasn't just family politics. It was money, property, inheritance. And suddenly, I wasn't just the quiet middle child anymore. I was an obstacle. Or worse, a threat. I didn't respond to the email right away. It sat in my inbox, unread but burned into my mind like a flickering warning light. Preliminary estate review. Just vague enough to sound harmless. Just official enough to feel important. And that phrase, "Please respond promptly," was classic mom speak, even when filtered through legalese. It didn't ask. It demanded. For a few days, I debated ignoring it entirely. But something didn't sit right. They had spent the last several months sabotaging, manipulating, and twisting every interaction to suit themselves. So why suddenly offer transparency? Why ask for a meeting? I knew my parents had assets. Nothing extravagant, but valuable enough. The family house, some retirement funds, a modest piece of land upstate they used to call their escape plan. Growing up, Dad used to talk about leaving it to us when the time was right. But in the same breath, he'd also joke that Lila's the favorite and Derek's the responsible one. So Sam, you better work hard. At the time, I thought it was a joke. Now, I wasn't so sure. I called the attorney the next morning. A woman named Claire. Professional, polite, efficient. I asked for details. She hesitated, citing client confidentiality. "Your parents asked for this meeting to be informal," she said. "But if you're listed on any assets or accounts, you have a right to review them." That's when I asked the question that changed everything. "Can you tell me if anything has already been transferred?" There was a long pause. Papers rustled on her end of the line. "Actually, yes," she said carefully. "There have been recent adjustments. The primary residence, their home, is in the process of being placed under joint ownership with Derek. Effective immediately." I blinked. "Wait, without a will?" "It's part of an early living trust transfer," Claire explained. "Not unusual, especially when one child is residing in the property long term. Derek didn't live there. Not anymore. But clearly, that didn't matter." I kept my voice steady. "What about the other assets? The upstate land? Retirement distributions?" She hesitated again. "At this time, those are being held under parental control. But I can tell you that there's been discussion of placing Lila as a secondary beneficiary. Not both of us. Just her. Not a word. Not a call. Not even a heads up. They were shuffling everything. The house, the future, the family legacy, behind my back." I thanked Claire, hung up, and sat in stunned silence. It wasn't even about the money. Not really. It was the confirmation. They were cutting me out. Quietly. strategically. And if I hadn't followed up, I might never have known until it was too late. But here's where it gets interesting. See, what my parents didn't know, couldn't have known, was that 2 months earlier, I'd been invited to a private Slack group by one of my freelance clients. A mix of financial consultants, legal aides, and small business owners. Kind of like an invite-only think tank for remote professionals. I joined mostly for networking, but I hadn't participated much until now. That same day, I dropped a question in the group. Hypothetically, what are someone's rights if their name was intentionally excluded from a family estate, despite prior verbal assurances and shared contributions? Within minutes, replies flooded in. One lawyer, based out of New York, messaged me privately. Turns out, she specialized in inheritance disputes and trust litigation. I told her everything, laid out the family dynamics, the pattern of manipulation, the financial entanglements, the sudden property transfer. I even sent her a redacted version of Claire's email and my own Venmo history, showing years of contributions, monthly utility splits, holiday payments, surprise repairs I'd covered. Let me guess, the lawyer said. They framed it all as voluntary, right? Every single time. She replied with one line. You have more leverage than you think. That sentence lit something inside me. Because for the first time, I wasn't standing on the outside of the house, looking in through the window. I was standing on solid ground, holding receipts, and seeing the whole structure for what it was. Rigged, yes, but not untouchable. Over the next 2 weeks, we worked quietly. She helped me draft a formal inquiry, a polite but firm legal letter requesting full documentation of any estate transfers, financial changes, or trust reassignments in which I was a potential stakeholder. It was framed professionally, the kind of letter that could come from someone angry or from someone just watching. It didn't accuse. It warned. I sent it through the attorney. Not to my parents. Not to Derek. Not to Lila. Just to Claire. That alone was enough to rattle the nest. 3 days later, my phone rang. Mom. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Sam, what is this? A lawyer? What are you trying to prove? We are family. Derek texted me next. This is low, man. After everything Mom and Dad have done for you. Then came Lila. You're being dramatic. This is about a house. Grow up. But none of them ever said, we didn't do it. Because they couldn't. They had been caught in the act, not by confrontation, but by documentation. And I hadn't even played my full hand yet. Because during those same 2 weeks, I'd done something else. I'd reviewed every Venmo payment, every email, every message where they guilt me into chipping in. And I'd created a timeline. A clean, neat list of transactions that painted a very different story, not of a selfish son, but of a pattern of manipulation and unspoken obligation. With that, I set up a second appointment with my lawyer. What do you want to do next? She asked. And for the first time, I had an answer. I don't want to take everything, I said. Just what's mine. And maybe a little piece. She smiled. That can be arranged. Revenge didn't come in the form of a screaming match or a dramatic confrontation in some lawyer's office. No, it was quieter than that. Colder. Controlled. Not an explosion, a slow leak of power. And it started with one simple email reply. Claire, thank you for confirming the asset transfers. I'm formally requesting full documentation regarding the estate and any recent changes made. Kindly send all relevant paperwork to my legal representative, Ms. Jessica Tan. Regards, Sam. The second that email went out, the game shifted. Because now they knew 2 things. I wasn't playing along anymore. I wasn't alone. A lawyer with a clean paper trail, a detailed timeline, and receipts was now in the loop, and they had no idea what Jessica knew or how far she'd go. But the truth? We hadn't even filed anything yet. No lawsuits. No public records. Just pressure. That subtle, legal kind of pressure that makes people sweat not because you've attacked, but because you've prepared to. Within 24 hours, I got a call from Claire. Your parents are alarmed, she said carefully. I almost smiled. They should be. They'd like to schedule a family meeting to resolve this. I paused. In person? Yes. I agreed, but with conditions. My lawyer would attend as a silent observer. We'd meet on neutral ground. Everything discussed would be documented. And most importantly, if they raised their voices, made accusations, or tried to guilt me, the meeting would end immediately. Claire relayed my terms. I expected them to back down. They didn't. I arrived at the conference room on the top floor of a quiet legal office downtown. Jessica was already there, calm and unreadable, a neat leather folder open in front of her. My parents were the last to arrive, Mom in pearls and forced grace, Dad with his arms folded like he was already disappointed in me. Derek came too. Lila did not. Interesting. We didn't shake hands. Didn't hug. Just sat. Claire opened. Thank you all for coming. Let's keep this professional. Mom dove in first, of course. We were trying to make responsible decisions, she said. Derek's been carrying a lot of the burden. We thought giving him partial ownership would make sense. I didn't speak. She continued. You've always been more independent, Sam. You don't need the house. Still, I said nothing. Jessica just tapped her pen lightly. Dad jumped in. You're blowing this out of proportion. We were going to explain everything. You were? Jessica asked smoothly. Before or after the paperwork finalized? Silence. Derek sighed. Look, man, this isn't about cutting you out. We just thought it made sense to keep things in the family. You live alone. No kids. We thought. There's that word again, I interrupted quietly. Thought. No one asked me. Claire tried to steer things back. Sam's requested full documentation. I believe that's a fair starting point. Jessica slid a document across the table. This is a formal request under estate review protocol. Once received, we'll determine if any financial contributions made by Sam were under mutual agreement or if restitution is appropriate. Restitution? Mom nearly laughed. You want to sue your own family? Jessica didn't blink. I didn't say that. But if my client's financial contributions were used to maintain property now being transferred without his consent, that raises legal questions. Dad looked at me for the first time. Really looked. You'd go that far? I met his eyes. I didn't come here to fight. I came here to get what I've earned. Nothing more. The silence that followed was deafening. In the end, I didn't need to file. I didn't need to go scorched earth. The threat alone, clean, precise, and backed with proof, was enough to unravel the whole plan. A week later, Claire sent an updated file. The transfer to Derek had been reversed. The land upstate was now frozen under a new legal trust, with all children listed equally. Any future adjustments would require unanimous consent. Jessica reviewed it, nodded, and said, "Smart move. Now they can't make a single decision without your signature." I thought that would be the end of it. But then came the part one didn't expect. Derek called me. Not to yell. Not to guilt me. To offer money. "Look," he said. "Things are tight. With the house stuff falling through. And the baby. Would you consider selling your share of the land? Just to keep the peace?" That's when it clicked. They weren't just upset because I stood up for myself. They were afraid. Because I wasn't just some quiet middle child anymore. I was a stakeholder. A gatekeeper. A name they couldn't erase from the paperwork or the decisions. And that, to them, was worse than losing money. It was losing control. So I told Derek I'd think about it. And I did. For about 5 seconds. Then I politely declined and said, "Family should share things, remember?" He hung up. I haven't heard from him since. After I declined Derek's offer, things went quiet again, but this time, it was a different kind of silence. Not the cold shoulder, not the temporary retreat before the next attack. This silence was heavy, final, the kind that settles after a door has been closed, locked, and quietly walked away from. I didn't attend the next few family events. The baby was born. I found out through a distant cousin's Instagram story. A grainy photo of Lila in a hospital bed, cradling her newborn. Derek was in the corner, smiling stiffly. No mention of me. No group chat announcement. No invitation. Not even a guilt trip text. They'd officially stopped trying to pretend I was still one of them. And honestly, I didn't feel sad. I felt free. The estate, thanks to Jessica's airtight adjustments, remained locked down. Every decision about the house, the land, the accounts, all required my consent. And I gave none. Not out of spite, but because I didn't trust them. They'd shown me what they were willing to do in secret. If I hadn't stepped in when I did, I would have been cut out completely. Now, they were stuck. 3 voices were required for any movement, and one of them belonged to me. Jessica called it quiet leverage. I called it justice. Over the next few months, Mom tried one last strategy, the peace offering. She emailed me a letter, long, rambling, and performative, about how families have ups and downs, how she never meant to make me feel excluded, how things had just been so stressful lately. She ended it with a line that would have gutted me 5 years ago. We just miss our son. But I'd come too far to fall for it now. There was no apology for the sabotage, no admission of the manipulation, no acknowledgement of the years of dismissal, of being used, of being erased. She missed the version of me who said yes to everything, not the version who'd finally stood up. I replied with 2 sentences. I'm glad you're reflecting. But this version of your son doesn't go backwards. No reply. That was nearly a year ago. Since then, I've built something better. I moved, not out of fear, but out of freedom. A better apartment, a better city. I still work remote, still stack freelance gigs, but now I do it on my terms. I travel more, sleep better, laugh more. And the best part? I live without looking over my shoulder. I've stopped checking the family group chat, not because I'm afraid of what I'll see, but because it doesn't matter anymore. They still whisper about me at family functions, I'm sure. Still twist the story. Still tell themselves I was the one who changed. They're right. I did change. I stopped bleeding for people who only noticed when I stopped bleeding. And the last time I visited the family land, just to walk it, to remember, I stood under the old oak tree at the edge of the property. The sun was setting. The wind was quiet. And I said, out loud, to no one, I don't owe you anymore. Then I turned around and walked away. And this time, no one followed. My name is Jake, I'm 32, and I've always been the odd one out in my family. Not in some melodramatic, black sheep kind of way. No, this was more subtle. My brother, Ryan, was the golden boy, varsity everything, straight teeth, naturally charismatic, and good at charming every adult in the room. I was quieter, more bookish, not great with crowds, and I liked to build things, computers, apps, small businesses, that kind of stuff. My parents were never cruel to me, not outright, but they made it clear in small ways that I was more of a responsibility than a source of pride. And Ryan? He could set the house on fire, and they'd blame the matches. I started working early, freelancing, tutoring, flipping tech on eBay. By the time I was 25, I'd founded a modest online business that took off faster than I expected. It wasn't flashy, and it didn't make headlines, but it made me enough to move out, buy a house, and eventually expand into a second company. Meanwhile, Ryan bounced from job to job. Marketing, real estate, a failed podcast. Every time something didn't work out, he'd move back in with our parents or ask for help. And every time, they welcomed him back like a war hero. Me? I never asked for anything. I just kept my head down and worked. I thought distance would fix things. It didn't. If anything, the more successful I became, the more they resented me for it. My mom once joked that I had too much money and not enough memories. My dad made backhanded comments about how some people hide behind work because they don't have people. It stung, but I swallowed it. I kept sending birthday gifts, paying for dinners, even covered some medical bills when Dad got sick and the insurance didn't fully kick in. I told myself, they're still my family. This is what you do. It all came to a head at my mom's birthday dinner last month. She turned 60, and my dad threw a big celebration at this upscale restaurant downtown. He rented out a private room, got a custom cake, even hired a live band. He told everyone it was going to be a classy, intimate affair, just close friends and family. I offered to pay for it. He said no, said it was his gift to her. I should have known that was code for, you'll be paying for it anyway, because the day before the event, I got a call from the restaurant confirming my card for the deposit. I didn't cancel it. I should have, but I didn't want to make a scene. Not on Mom's birthday. The night of the dinner, I showed up in a navy suit, brought a small wrapped box. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet I'd had custom made for her with all our initials, and tried to keep the peace. Ryan was already there, working the room like he was running for office. His girlfriend was draped on his arm, laughing a little too loud at every joke, wearing a dress I was pretty sure I paid for last Christmas when she mentioned she couldn't afford anything nice for the family photo shoot. My parents were glowing, surrounded by friends, drinking wine, eating off plates I was unknowingly footing the bill for. I mostly sat quietly at my corner of the long table, talking to a cousin or two, sipping water. I don't drink much, especially not around family. I've learned that clear judgment is my only real defense. Then came the toast. My dad stood first, naturally, and went on about how wonderful Mom is, how she's the heart of the family, how none of us would be who we are without her love. Then Ryan stood, smiling, glass raised. That same smug expression I've seen since we were kids, like he was about to knock over my sandcastle and pretend it was an accident. "Here's to family," he said, grinning wide. "To the love, the loyalty, the shared history. And to those who remember what matters, real connection, not just numbers in a bank account." Except for Jake, of course, he chuckled, glancing around the table for effect. The failure who thinks money makes him worth something. I didn't laugh, but everyone else did. My parents, my aunts, even Mom, who shook her head and smirked like it was just good fun. I stared at him, then at them, and for a moment, it felt like I was 14 again, sitting in the back seat while they all told me to lighten up when Ryan accidentally broke my laptop. I stood up, calmly, picked up my glass of water. The room got quiet, like they were waiting for me to storm out or make a scene. Instead, I smiled, just a little, and raised my glass. "To the failure," I said, voice steady, "who just stopped paying for everything you own." I watched my dad's smile falter first, followed by my mom blinking like she didn't quite hear me right. Ryan snorted, then paused. I didn't sit back down. "I was going to wait until tomorrow," I continued. "But since we're doing speeches, I've closed every account, canceled every recurring charge, and revoked every shared access. The car insurance, the utilities on the lake house, the family Netflix, gone. The emergency fund account Mom used last month? Emptied. Not stolen, mine. And the restaurant bill tonight? Well," I glanced toward the door where the manager was standing. "That's on you now." The silence that followed was delicious. But I wasn't done. I've been carrying this family financially for years. Quietly, without complaint, because I thought it meant something. But this, I gestured around the table. "This clears it up." Then I turned to leave. My dad stood up abruptly. "Jake, don't be ridiculous." But I was already walking past the stunned faces. As I reached the exit, I could hear Ryan mutter something under his breath, and then his girlfriend saying, "Wait, what does he mean the car insurance is canceled?" I stepped out into the night, the cool air hitting me like a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My heart was pounding, not with rage, but with relief. It had taken me 32 years to realize something simple. You don't owe people who keep treating your generosity like a weakness. And now, for the first time, I was free from that weight. What happened after that dinner? That's where things got interesting. I didn't go home right away. I walked, for almost an hour, just around downtown, past the dim restaurants and flickering street lamps, trying to make sense of the knot in my chest. It wasn't anger anymore, though that had been there at first. No, this was something quieter, sadder. The kind of ache you feel when you finally admit to yourself that a relationship, or a whole collection of them, has been dead a lot longer than you were willing to admit. I had spent years trying to buy peace, trying to earn respect with silence and support. But respect given conditionally was never respect at all. And that night, I finally stopped trying to buy what they were never going to offer freely. By the time I got home, I had 2 voicemails from my dad, 3 from my mom, and about 7 texts from Ryan. None of them said sorry. My dad's voice was tight with forced calm. "Jake, we need to talk. You embarrassed everyone tonight, and that's not how we handle things in this family. I don't know what you're trying to prove, but call me back and fix this." Mom's message tried a different angle. "Sweetheart, I think you misunderstood Ryan's joke. He didn't mean anything by it. Please don't make a rash decision. We'll talk tomorrow over lunch, just the 2 of us, okay?" And Ryan's texts? Classic Ryan. "Grow up. You overreacted like always. So what? You're cutting everyone off because of a joke. LMAO. Hope you enjoy being rich and alone." It stung more than I wanted it to. Not because I believed him, but because part of me still wanted him to be someone he wasn't. Someone who'd realize he crossed a line and feel even a flicker of guilt. But that wasn't Ryan. That had never been Ryan. The next morning, I woke up to chaos. Apparently, canceling the accounts wasn't just a symbolic gesture. It was a logistical earthquake. The group family phone plan I'd been paying for? Gone. Mom's phone was off. Dad's voicemail was full. Ryan's girlfriend had posted a story on Instagram saying, "Some people only love you when they're paying for you. #lesson learned." And tagged Ryan with a picture of the 2 of them arguing in what looked like a used car lot. Subtle. I had to chuckle. I hadn't even touched the car note yet. That came later. See, after that dinner, I didn't just cancel their accounts. I started going through everything, one by one. I'd never wanted to keep a tally, but the spreadsheet I started that weekend opened my eyes. Over the last 7 years, I had paid for 4 vacations, including flights and accommodations, covered over $18,000 in combined credit card debt for my parents, helped Ryan with 3 business ideas that all went nowhere, bought his car outright when his lease was denied due to poor credit, paid off a balance on my mom's surgery when insurance fell short, funded a surprise 30th anniversary cruise for my parents. And not once, did I receive a thank you that wasn't paired with some dig about how I worked too much or missed out on real life. That spreadsheet? I sent it to all 3 of them. Not with a message. No explanation. Just a file titled ledger.xlsx and a simple subject line. In case you forgot. Ryan responded almost instantly. Wow, you really are that petty. Congrats. You want a parade too? I didn't reply. Mom didn't either. But the next day, she showed up at my place. Alone. Now, to be clear, I hadn't told her where I lived. But I guess Ryan had seen a delivery address on one of the shared Amazon orders, back when we all used my Prime account. I opened the door and saw her standing there, wearing a thick scarf and holding a small box of pastries from a bakery I used to love as a kid. She smiled like nothing had happened. Hi, sweetheart. I didn't say anything. I just wanted to talk. Clear the air. May I come in? I stepped aside, wordless, and she walked into the living room like she still knew the layout. She sat, placed the box on the coffee table, and looked around. It's beautiful here. You've done well for yourself. I stayed standing, arms crossed. I think there's been a misunderstanding, she started, already on shaky ground. No, I said. There hasn't. Her expression faltered. Jake, you have to understand, you're different. You always have been. Ryan struggled more. He's always needed support. And I didn't. She blinked, caught off guard. Well, you're strong. You figure things out. Because I had to. That silence between us stretched until it felt like I could hear the walls breathing. She tried again. He's your brother, Jake. Family is. Family doesn't mock you over wine you paid for, in a suit you bought, while your parents laugh. That hit her. Not hard enough, but it hit. I'm not coming back, I said, more quietly now. I'm not playing that role anymore. The wallet. The silent fixer. The failure with the credit card. Her hands trembled slightly. We didn't mean. You meant every word. You just didn't think I'd stop funding it. She left not long after. Took the pastries with her. I don't think she even realized she had grabbed them on her way out. The fallout only got worse from there. Ryan's girlfriend broke up with him 2 days later. Something about finally seeing him clearly. The car I bought him was repossessed when I canceled the title transfer and retracted the insurance and registration. Since, legally, it was still under my name. He tried to call me the day it was towed. I didn't answer. I thought things might quiet down after that. That maybe they'd get the message. But then, something happened that changed everything. It started with an envelope. About a week after the dinner, after Mom's visit and the fallout with Ryan, I came home late one evening to find a thick manila envelope shoved halfway under my front door. No return address. My name written on the front in tight, familiar handwriting, Dad's. I stood there for a moment, just staring at it. 1,000 scenarios ran through my mind. Was it a legal threat? Some attempt to guilt me? A desperate plea to talk? I picked it up, walked inside, and opened it at the kitchen counter under the soft hum of the pendant light. Inside were several sheets of paper. Printed emails, some legal-looking documents, and, tucked between them, a folded handwritten note. I pulled it out last. It was short, just a few lines. Jake, I know we've made mistakes. I made mistakes, but I need you to see something. Before this goes further, please. Dad. The tone was strange. Not warm, but not hostile either. Just tired. And underneath it, something else I couldn't quite place. Urgency? I set the note aside and started flipping through the rest. That's when I saw the first bank statement. It was a joint account in my parents' names. Over the last 2 years, large withdrawals had been made regularly, some monthly, some larger and more sporadic. The name attached to the majority of the transfers? Ryan Weston. The amounts weren't small. For $1,000 here, $2,500 there. 1 month even showed 2 separate transfers totaling over $9,000. And then I found the email thread between my dad and their accountant. It dated back to almost a year ago. The subject line read, about the house line of credit. In the emails, Dad had expressed concern about the growing debt against their home. He'd asked how much longer they could stretch things before refinancing would be denied. There was a lot of hesitation in his wording, a lot of indirect phrases like, "We were trying to help Ryan get back on his feet, and we didn't want Jake to know because he's done enough already." I sat down slowly, heart pounding. They'd leveraged the house. Their house. The one they'd owned outright since before I graduated high school. They'd taken out a line of credit and funneled it directly to Ryan, quietly, over years. And now it was maxed. I kept reading. Tucked behind a folded property document was one more printed email from Ryan to Dad. It was short, sent just a few days after the dinner. "If Jake won't help anymore, we need to look into selling. You said the market was strong. I know Mom doesn't want to, but you said yourself we might not have a choice." He made his decision. We can't wait around. I stared at the email for a long time. It wasn't just that they'd hidden this from me. It was that Ryan, after years of taking, after mocking me in front of a full room of people, was still trying to squeeze more out of them. Out of my parents. And they were still entertaining it. Despite everything, they were still letting him drive the ship straight into the rocks. But that's not what made my stomach sink. What hit hardest was that line. "We didn't want Jake to know because he's done enough already." It was the closest thing to an acknowledgement I'd ever gotten from my dad. And it wasn't even said to me. It was buried in an email thread he probably never intended me to see. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. A part of me wanted to ignore it, to toss the folder into a drawer and pretend it hadn't happened. Another part wanted to march over there and demand answers. But the biggest part of me, quiet and cold, knew exactly what I had to do. This wasn't about just me anymore. If I didn't step in now, Ryan was going to bleed them dry. And unlike me, they didn't have a safety net. I needed a plan. The next day, I contacted a lawyer. I laid everything out. Not because I wanted to sue them. God, no. But because I wanted to protect what was left. To create some kind of legal structure that could prevent them from being manipulated further. We talked trusts, power of attorney, financial safeguards. But more than anything, I needed leverage. Not to punish them, but to finally make them see the truth they'd been avoiding for years. The lawyer agreed to help and asked for copies of the documents. I sent over everything. Then I waited. Meanwhile, I stopped answering their calls. A week passed. Then two. Then, one evening my doorbell rang. And there he was. Ryan. Standing on my doorstep. Not smug. Not smirking. This time, he looked desperate. "Jake," he said. "We need to talk." I didn't say a word. Because in that moment, I realized he didn't know what was coming. And I wasn't going to warn him. Not this time. I didn't move at first. Just stared at him standing there. Hands in his jacket pockets. Face tight with anxiety. Lips pressed into a thin line. The usual bravado was gone. No cocky grin. No sarcastic quip. He looked like a man who finally understood that the ship he set on fire was now drifting out to sea. And he wasn't on shore anymore. I opened the door just wide enough to let him in. Mostly because I didn't want to have this conversation on my doorstep with neighbors watching. He walked in cautiously, like he was afraid I'd slam the door behind him and lock him in. Or out. He looked around like the house might somehow judge him too. Sleek, modern, spotless. Paid for in full. Unlike everything he'd ever touched. We sat at the kitchen island. I didn't offer him anything to drink. He didn't ask. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he sighed, long and slow. "You really cut everything off." I said I would. His knee bounced. "You don't think that was a little extreme?" I let the silence answer that. He ran a hand through his hair. "Look, I messed up. Okay. The toast, the joke. I shouldn't have said it. I was drunk, and I thought it'd be funny. I didn't expect you to blow up our lives over it." "You didn't blow up our lives with the joke," I said, finally turning to look at him. "You did that years ago. The joke was just the only honest thing you've said in a long time." He didn't like that. He leaned back, arms crossed. "So what? This is about respect now. This is about everything," I said, my voice low but firm. "Everything I've done for you. For Mom and Dad. All the years of paying, helping, fixing things you broke. And never, not once, did any of you stop to ask what it was costing me. Not the money. The weight of it. You didn't have to do any of that," he muttered, but I could see the guilt creeping in behind his eyes. "No," I said. "I didn't. But I did it because I thought that's what family does. I thought if I gave enough, you'd stop seeing me as the failure. But the more I gave, the more you resented me for it. The more I tried to help, the more you laughed behind my back." He opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, but nothing came out. "So why are you here?" I asked. He hesitated. And then, with a deep breath, he said, "Dad's going to lose the house." I leaned back slowly. "I know." He looked up at me, shocked. "You know?" I stood, walked over to a drawer, and pulled out the manila folder. The original one. I dropped it on the counter in front of him. "Got this the day after you sent that email to Dad. The one where you told him to sell the house, because I wouldn't help." His face drained of color. "You've been bleeding them dry, Ryan. Thousands. Over years. And they let you. Because they didn't want to lose you." He looked away. "I didn't mean for it to get that bad." "You never mean anything, Ryan. That's the problem. You just take. And when it falls apart, you act surprised." He rubbed his face. "So what now? You just let them lose everything." I sat again, slowly. "No." His eyes snapped to mine. "I'm going to save the house," I said. "I've already set things in motion. The lawyer I hired is drafting a new trust. I'm buying the house from them, at a fair market price, and putting it into a protected fund they can live off for the rest of their lives." He blinked. "You're buying it?" "Yes. With conditions. They won't own it anymore. But they won't be homeless either. No more debt, no more second mortgages. Just peace. I'll even pay off the remainder of their credit lines. Quietly. Legally. Safely." He stared at me for a long time, unsure of whether to feel relieved or offended. "And what about me?" I didn't flinch. "You're not part of the deal." He froze. "Wait. I'm done financing your chaos," I said. "No more bailouts. No more second chances. You've had a lifetime of them. This is where it ends." His voice rose. "You're going to throw me out?" "Out of everything. You threw yourself out," I replied. All I did was stop holding the door open. His jaw clenched. "What do I even have left?" I looked him dead in the eye. "Whatever you choose to build. If you want something, go earn it. The way I did. The way everyone has to." For a moment, he sat there, stunned. Then he stood abruptly and pushed the stool back with a screech. "You think you're better than me now," he said, his voice shaking. "No," I said. "I always was. You just refused to see it." He stared at me like he wanted to say more. But there was nothing left to say. He walked out. And this time, I didn't follow. Over the next few weeks, I finalized the transfer of the house. My lawyer handled most of it. Mom and Dad signed the paperwork with quiet gratitude. Eyes down, no jokes, no sarcasm. Just tired thank yous and the occasional sniffle. I didn't stay long that day. I didn't want to hear their apologies. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The house was safe. Their debts were cleared. A small monthly stipend was set up through the trust for their living expenses. It wasn't extravagant, but it was secure. There were rules, protections, safeguards. If Ryan ever tried to touch a dime of it, the trust would lock up instantly. A few months later, I heard he moved in with a friend across town. Tried getting another job in marketing. Word was he quit after 3 weeks. Something about the manager being condescending. Classic Ryan. Mom sent me a card that Christmas. Just a card. No gifts. No requests. Inside was a single line. "We didn't deserve your grace. But thank you anyway." I stared at it for a long time. Then I placed it in the drawer with the folder and left it there. I don't see them much anymore. Holidays, sometimes. Quick calls every other month. It's polite. Civil, surface level. I keep my distance. Not out of bitterness, just clarity. Some people belong in your life only once they stop having power over it. As for me, I sleep better now. There's peace in boundaries. There's power in choosing where your story goes, instead of letting others write it for you. For the first time in my life, I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm just living. And that's more than enough.